AI deepfakes, the future of manufacturing technology, and how much ERP software really costs. Those are just a few of the topics we're going to cover here today in episode 172 of Transformation Ground Control.
Welcome to Transformation Ground Control. Ground Control. The podcast that covers everything related to digital transformation. This podcast features technology agnostic and international discussions related to digital strategy, software selection, implementation, change management, business process optimization, and everything else you need to know to make your digital transformation project successful. Whether you're embarking on an ERP implementation, supply chain transformation, or any other business or digital transformation, this podcast is for you. Now, here's your host, Eric Kimberling.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Hello, welcome to the Transformation Ground Control podcast, episode number 172. This is the podcast that has everything to do with digital transformation, including the people, process, technology, and strategy, sides of change. You can find new episodes of this show every Wednesday by going to transformationgroundcontrol.com. My name is Eric Kimberling. I'm the CEO of Third Stage Consulting, and we're an independent consulting firm that helps clients throughout the world with their digital transformation journeys. And the show is sponsored by Third Stage Consulting, produced by Major Tom Productions. With me, joining me as my co-host is Darian Chwialkowski. Darian, thanks for being here today.
Thanks for having me.
Great show for us here today. We're going to chat through some audience questions to get started. We're also going to get into some of our trending newsworthy topics. At the top of the segment, we're going to talk about deepfakes with AI and some of the consequences of that. We're also going to talk about Oracle's recent announcement that they're moving to Nashville. So we'll get to those hot topics here in a moment. And then later in the show, we'll bring on our guest for this episode, who is Walker Reynolds, the CEO of 4.0 Solutions, and he's going to be with me chatting about the future of manufacturing technology. And then last but not least, we're going to talk about how much ERP software really costs. We're going to play you a YouTube video where we unpack that concept a little bit more and explain how to get a realistic cost for your ERP implementation. But before we get to those topics and those guests, what audience questions do you have for us here today, Darian?
Yeah, some good audience questions today. The first one is absolutely great content, Eric. I think the integration of all 30,000 custom AI apps to create a single supermodel of AI could lead to better integration, standardization, optimization, but also about how industry-specific factors in this instance. How do you think that this could actually work if you combine every AI feature that was out there into one? Do you think it would be adopted faster? Or do you think it's good to have different kinds of AI out there? I think is what he's asking.
Yeah, that's a great question. Because I think, there's on one hand a lot of innovation happening, obviously, with AI in terms of different software startups that are focused on AI and obviously existing ERP or different existing software vendors that are building AI capabilities into their existing software. So there's just a ton of AI use cases being generated and tons of AI solutions. So that's the good news with the innovation, but the bad news is it's becoming very fragmented. And just like any industry, at some point it will probably need to consolidate, because I don't know that the market can sustain all these different startups and these companies that aren't yet monetizing or turning a profit on their solutions. So eventually there'll probably be quite a bit of consolidation down the road in the AI space regardless. But I think there's some advantage to that, though, too, in that on one hand you want that innovation and that startup community being vibrant and creating new solutions and just creating creative ways of being innovative using AI. But on the other hand, AI is all about training algorithms and training language models to learn. And the more data you have, the better the AI tools are going to be. So there's also a case to be made for scale and less AI startups and less AI. I don't want to say less innovation, but less fragmentation in the AI space, to where you have maybe less vendors, but more data training those models. So I think it's a fine line or a balancing act that the industry is going to need to do. Maintain the innovation, but also recognize that there's some beauty and advantage to scale and having data to train your models.
Right, because for those smaller companies that are startup and maybe don't have as much access to data, those AIs just really won't be able to compete with like Google's AI or Chat's AI, like OpenAI, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and if you've got less customers, less data to learn from, and less, I guess the exception might be if you're building building your AI solution to tie in or use OpenAI or one of the larger AI models as the backbone of it, then you could still get the benefit of scale and mass amounts of data. But just building sort of an application that does something very specific with that information. So there's ways around it, and you see some vendors that are using OpenAI on their back end but just creating a different use for OpenAI with their applications.
Yeah, super interesting. I think it'll be interesting. I think we always say this, but to see how, whether it scales and whether we see a lot more startups in the next few years, or if we do see that kind of like scale down and there's these big competitors more so in the next few years, like how that kind of develops is really interesting.
It's an exciting time for sure. I was thinking recently that, my kids don't remember a time when there wasn't the internet or wasn't like smartphones or iPhones or whatever. You and I and others are going to remember being around when AI wasn't around, and someday, future generations are going to think that's weird that there was a time when AI didn't exist. So that's always fun to think about as well.
Yeah, that'll be, what? What do you mean AI didn't exist? How did you write a paper?
Yeah, exactly. What did you do?
Yeah, but that's a really great question. Our next question today is another AI question. What is your opinion on AI in business? Is it simply hype or is there real potential? This was a question that you actually asked to people on LinkedIn, and we got a lot of answers there. So one of the answers was, I was torn, but I still see it as potential value. It is fast moving, so there is some incremental valuable being delivered, but it's not fully understood, and until then it's not delivering its full potential yet. So Eric, what are your thoughts on that type of comment where it's not delivering its full potential yet, but it's moving very fast?
I think it's really well said. I think that's a good summary because there's a lot of potential. There's a lot that AI can do right now for businesses, and certainly in the future even more that AI could be doing. But I think the problem or the challenge is it is moving so fast, and it's such a new thing that's really disrupting industry in general that a lot of people just don't have their heads around how to use it within the organization. So yeah, we can all use ChatGPT right now. You can go use ChatGPT for free, the free version, or you can pay a nominal fee to get the more advanced features for a pretty low cost. So all of us have access to AI right now, pretty powerful AI tools. But the question is, like, even in our personal lives, how are we going to use AI? What's our sort of our MO for how we interact with that AI and how we use it? Same goes for businesses too. You've got hundreds and thousands of different workflows and processes happening within a business, all that could probably benefit in some way from AI. So the question becomes, how do we design our organization to take advantage of AI? And I think it's sort of interesting because I think there's an important bottoms up and tops down approach to this, where you need innovators on the front lines, people that are maybe a little bit more forward thinking or a little bit more open to technologies and trying out new things, and maybe they just like experimenting with new technologies. You want to leverage those people in your organization to help define how your organization could be using AI to streamline operations or just to be better at what you do. But then you also need, once you identify where those successful use cases are, you then need sort of a top-down approach to sort of scale that across the organization to say, okay, Darian identified this great way that we could be using AI. She's proven it in her job. Let's scale that across 1,000 employees now. And to do that, you have to sort of revert from Darian taking a bottoms-up approach to identifying the innovative way to use AI to now the top-down approach that a leadership has to say, okay, we're going to use this as a way to improve our business across however many employees and different business processes. And so you have to, I think that's the leadership challenge, is really listening to the organization and driving that innovation and being open to that innovation, but at the same time recognizing when the time comes that there's a point where you're going to want to not force it, but you're going to want to take that top-down approach to really scale it across the organization. So I think it's not that the technology is not there and that people aren't going to be able to figure out how to take advantage of the technology. It's more of a leadership and a cultural thing that organizations are struggling with right now as it relates to AI.
Yeah, and I think, I know we'll talk about this later with Walker a bit in the manufacturing way, but for organizations that maybe have some people that don't want to explore technology, do you suggest that they need somebody in there to explore that technology if they don't have anybody currently doing that now, or if they're super against it right now? Do you say that every organization needs it, or is there some restraint on that some organizations maybe just don't need AI?
I mean, I think, I guess you don't quote unquote need AI right now, at least not in the near future. But I mean, honestly, that's a weak argument. I mean, you could argue that, but I think that's something that'll catch up to you pretty quickly if you don't embrace it. So, I'm not a big fan of saying, hey, let's go deploy technology for technology's sake without really understanding what it is we're trying to accomplish. But in the case of AI, it's something that is changing so fast, and it's an opportunity for organizations to get ahead. This is one of those tectonic shifts in the market right now that's happening as we speak, to where if an organization can really say, hey, we're going to be a little bit more innovative than we've been in the past, or we're going to be more on the bleeding edge of technology than we've been in the past. I see AI as a relatively low risk way to do that, and to really get ahead and be on the bleeding edge. Now, when it comes to like massive ERP transformations that cost tens of millions of dollars for a lot of organizations, I would say you want to be real careful before you get on the bleeding edge of that, because you could lose a lot of money. You could disrupt your business in a positive or a negative way. And so you've got to be real careful with those sorts of transformations. But AI is such an organic thing that it's relatively low cost. It is something that can be used organically at smaller cases, but also at scale. So I think organizations, that is a technology I think organizations really need to get in front of and learn to embrace. So I hate to say every organization should do it right now, but I think if you're not thinking about AI and not looking at ways to use AI, you're just going to fall far behind, and you're missing out on an opportunity to be ahead of your competition right now.
Yeah, super interesting points. And I'm excited to kind of switch gears a little bit, because we're going to still talk about AI in our topics today from Newsworthy Topics, but kind of in a different way, and some of the dangers of AI from not a company perspective, but just from a social perspective.
Yeah, we're going to get into AI deepfakes, and it was only a matter of time before this became a newsworthy topic, and be curious to talk about that. How AI is being used for deepfake, in many cases nefarious deepfake purposes. We'll talk about that here in a moment. We're also going to talk about Oracle's news that they're moving to Nashville after they just moved to Austin not too long ago. So they're packing up shop in Austin. Now they're moving to Nashville again. And then later in the show, you mentioned Walker Reynolds. Walker is a great guest we've had on this podcast before. I think last year he was on. It's been a while since he's been on, so we're going to have him back on here today to talk about the future of manufacturing technology, including AI. It's inevitable that we'll get into AI in that conversation. And then later in the show, after Walker is on, we'll talk about how much ERP software really costs. So stick around. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with more Transformation Ground Control. Welcome back to the Transformation Ground Control podcast. And joining me before we get into more of our content here today, joining me for a quick conversation is Brian Ketchel, the Vice President of Sales of North America at Priority Software. Brian, thanks for being here today.
Thanks for having me, Eric. Appreciate it.
Yeah, good to have you. And you've got a company you work for called Priority Software that some may not have heard of, may not be familiar with. There's certainly a lot of ERP systems in the marketplace. So tell us, what is Priority Software and how is Priority's ERP solution unique?
Yeah, so Priority Software, we've been in the business for 40 years. We're relatively new to the North American space. Entered the space in 2016 and really sort of reinforced that in 2019 with the purchase of an accounting software called Account Edge or Acclivity. But as far as Priority and what makes us unique is that we're really, not just an ERP. It's really a versatile cloud platform that we built an ERP within. That helps organizations obviously manage their business more efficiently with scalable options and an affordable price point that really cater to businesses of all sizes. The users enjoy a user-friendly interface with the ability to personalize any aspect of the system with no coding, utilizing our business process management workflows, and allowing customers to create mobile apps, portals, manage workflows, etc. Also, powered by artificial intelligence, it offers process automations, recommendations, and optimization algorithms. On top of it, we have a robust, set of functionalities. And features like, obviously that are typically required in ERP, finance, et cetera, but also unique features such as a native WMS or warehouse management system, purchasing, manufacturing, planning tools, field service, as well as mobile app and portal generators.
Right. And so, it's interesting because a lot of times people think when they, pick an ERP system, they need to pick one of the household names, one of the ones you see at airport lounges or whatever. And that's not necessarily the case. You guys have some capabilities that a lot of ERP systems, some of them have and a lot of them don't have. So I'm curious to hear some of these unique features that you mentioned, such as the portal generator. Can you tell us a little bit more about some of the features that your software has?
Yeah, the portal generator really, it takes collaboration to another level, allows you to create no-code, user-friendly portals that grant your vendors, your customers direct access into certain aspects of your ERP. Of course, that's done in a very secure manner and in a secure environment. But it breaks down communication barriers and fosters streamlined workflow for both you and your external contacts. So secure custom portals directly within the system, avoid those sort of messy integrations that can take place. But just take, for example, everybody wants self-service, right? This burgeoning trend that we have, and transparency within their interactions with their businesses or their vendors or suppliers or what have you. So, for example, with just a few simple clicks, and a sales manager, for example, can craft a, self-service customer experience aligned with that organization's unique business rules, allows the business to save time and resources by leveraging that inherent logic built into our ERP. And it makes it easier for vendors, suppliers, and most importantly, their customers to do business with them.
Right, right. Now, you also mentioned you have a native warehouse management system. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, absolutely, we do. And it's a huge benefit that's not as common in the industry, especially being native within the solution. It's built by actually a person who started out working in a warehouse. I know that you've met Eyal, but he's effectively the inventor. So you don't need to integrate the application, and it's built, of course, with those warehouse employees and managers in mind. It allows users to see, on a single screen, what the warehouse employee needs to do, whether it's pick, pack, ship, put away, etc. And the app can automatically deal with discrepancies according to predefined rules. We allow for the personalization of each process. So warehouse workers' activities, such a number of daily tasks they're able to complete in a day, what order they do their tasks, as well as optimizing storage space, can all be executed through the warehouse management. Obviously, we want to ensure accuracy as well. So, for example, we work with a beer distributor. You can imagine they have different bottles, different kegs, different beers, different locations. So with the WMS, one of the things that it can help with is, right, if the warehouse employee picks a 750 milliliter bottle for an order, and it's supposed to be a 1.5 liter, it's not going to allow them to pick that and put it into the packing. As far as optimization, we have another customer that's an automotive distributor that went from 95% warehouse capacity to 60% warehouse capacity, and we're able to add more lines of business without increasing the warehouse space necessary by purchasing or leasing additional space. So it's a really cool tool, very powerful, and fully native to the ERP.
Yeah, it's always interesting when you have a solution like that that's built by an end user, someone that actually has worked in a warehouse versus a technologist who thinks they know what they're doing, but they're just building technology. So that's always interesting, and I think that gives you guys an interesting perspective on the functionality you've built. And you were talking about just a moment ago some of the warehouse benefits and the value that you saw with one customer. What are some of the other things that you're hearing from your customers about the value that you and your software brings to them?
Yeah, so our customers really like, first of all, our flexibility. Our system really empowers, because we're built on that platform and really not like pigeonholed into our ERP. We have the flexibility to do a lot of things allow our customers to build their own documents, mobile apps, web portals with no code and no hassle, They can personalize their home pages and searches, while, of course, we have AI running in the background to help with those recommendations within their work habits. Openness is really important to our customers as well, and it's a fundamental value for Priority. We excel in seamless connectivity with various platforms and devices. And we offer, tools like REST API, ODBC for custom integrations, a marketplace for plug and play connectors, and embedded integrations as well, such as digital banking and tax services. And I think the other thing that people are looking for in an ERP is not to buy another ERP. So simplicity and scalability. So we facilitate organizational growth by offering the flexibility for our customers to adapt to market shifts, evolving business models, what have you. And central to this is, our business process management, or BPM tool that's integrated into Priority ERP. And what customers can do with that is really autonomously create their own business processes without relying on system integrators to come in and make changes. So it empowers them to update workflows according to their evolving business needs.
No, that's great. In addition to some of these warehouse management and some of the other value and the capabilities you've talked about, I also understand that Priority is active in the electronics manufacturing space. What can you tell me about the work you're doing in that industry vertical?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, we have nearly 4 decades of experience in the ERP space, founded in '86. So, we've been helping numerous clients as well as electronics manufacturers globally. We have companies that, have a wide array of needs, not needs, but industries or sub-industries that they're in, like, manufacturing communication devices, consumer electronics, internal components. We have a customer that manufactures motherboards for slot machines, right? And they're out in Nevada. But this particular industry faces significant challenges that are pretty unique with regards to need for real-time information in production, inventory management complexities due to rapid technological shifts, and the demand for customized products, as well as the traceability for quality assurance. So we have all of that inherent, and we address those challenges, covering, all sorts of different areas from sales, planning, production, quality assurance, warehousing, delivery, and of course the financials. And then with features like end-to-end traceability and real-time visibility into the production and the supply chain, Priority empowers those electronics manufacturers, all manufacturers really, but especially, to streamline operations, enhance productivity, efficiency, and really most importantly, profitability.
Right. Oh, that's great. Yeah, well, I appreciate you being here today to share more about Priority and some of the things you're working on and some of the markets you're serving right now. For those that are listening that want to learn more either about warehouse management or Priority software in general, check out the links below in the show notes. There's a link that's included in the resource center, and that link will take you to some resources, including like a coffee talk and some other resources that will help you as you continue your ERP evaluation. So thanks for being here, Brian. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Eric. Good talking to you.
Let's not say so long. It might just be fantastic.
Hello, welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 172. My name's Eric Kimberling. You can find new episodes of this show every Wednesday by going to transformationgroundcontrol.com. The show is produced by Major Tom Productions and sponsored by Third Stage Consulting. You can find all the past episodes at transformationgroundcontrol.com as well. So, some interesting news you've got for us here, Darian. What do you have in store for us?
Yeah, so the first one is AI and deepfakes and how it's been used to create deepfakes currently. In Maryland, actually, there was an incident where AI was actually used to make an audio recording of a high school principal making inappropriate comments. And then this kind of blew up everywhere on social media, it went viral, I guess you could say. And there was some professional repercussions for the principal, even though he never said these things and it was just a deep fake generated AI recording. And so this is also happening. We see it on Twitter with inappropriate images of like basketball players or famous celebrities or anything like that. We've seen it on Twitter. So it's very interesting to see how this is developing, and there hasn't been any sort of regulation set to it before yet, I guess, for if these, like, they try to shut these images down, obviously, or recordings down as quickly as possible, but there's no repercussions or anything that is happening to people that are creating these right now. So Eric, what do you think that are some regulations that should be attached to the usage of AI so we can try and avoid things like this happening to just everyday people? Because I know that's something that nobody really wants happening to them.
Yeah, it's a pretty alarming sort of a scenario, but I guess suppose it was inevitable that you would have this deepfake concept. I can't remember. I haven't talked about it recently, but I talked about it a while back on this podcast. But there's a TikTok account on TikTok that's called, I think it's still around. I haven't seen it lately, but it was called, at the time I was following it or was seeing it in my feed often, it was called Deep Tom Cruise. And it was basically, a deep fake of Tom Cruise, but it looked just like Tom Cruise doing all this funny stuff, and it was actually a pretty funny channel, which is why I liked watching it. But apparently it was all AI generated. It wasn't really Tom Cruise. And apparently, from what I understood from doing research on the company that had that account, it was an AI company that Tom Cruise had some sort of investment in or some sort of financial tie to, which is why they were able to use him as sort of the deep fake for marketing purposes. But I remember seeing these videos thinking, wow, that looks stunning. Like, it was just, I could not tell it wasn't Tom Cruise. I mean, it looked like Tom Cruise back in the 90s, when he was like in his 30s or around 40. Not that he doesn't look great now, but, he was younger, clearly. But it was like the younger version of Tom Cruise, but it looked, acted, sounded just like him. So the technology clearly is there. So I suppose it's just a matter of time. But I don't know how you regulate it, to get to your question. I mean, I suppose it goes, this goes back to like photoshopping. We could all Photoshop. I could Photoshop a picture of you. You could Photoshop a picture of me, and make it look like I'm doing something I'm not. So I suppose it's been a problem that's been around for a while with the internet. But I don't know if you use, because I'm not an attorney, I don't know if you use what is it, slander or what's the other law or the other violation? Slander or libel. I'm not sure if there's like, if I say something bad about you and it hurts you, then you could sue me for it. Yeah. So I don't know if that's the way, the legal avenue to regulate it would be to say, if someone does a deep fake of me and I'm harmed by it, then is that the same as libel or slander or whatever? Or defamation, I suppose, defamation of character. I imagine you could probably use some of those laws that are in place or those precedents that are in place legally to pursue that. But having said that, I mean, that's a lot of headache to make sure that people don't do a deep fake or do something that could harm, someone, especially people in public. You look at celebrities and politicians. I mean, I imagine politics is going to get real nasty here over the next few years because, how great would that be if we could just create a deep fake of our political opponent doing something horrendous that would make sure no one voted for him? I mean, it seems like that's a low-hanging fruit for someone to use AI deep fakes in that way, but we'll see. I'm not sure. I don't have a good answer for you other than to say I would think some of the laws that are in place now could be used or extended to cover deepfake type of stuff as well.
Yeah, and that makes an interesting point because, like, after it happens, it becomes very hard to regulate it. But do you think there should be some sort of regulation on the companies that are making this technology? Is that a way to maybe quickly nip it in the butt, I guess you could say, in that way?
Yeah, probably. I mean, I think when you look at what OpenAI is doing, for example, as a company, they from what I understand, OpenAI is a for-profit company, but their board that regulates or manages the company is a non-profit. So it's like governed by a non-profit that has a social mission or purpose. And the social mission or purpose is to make sure that's responsible use of AI. And so, I know, for example, I went on to AI and I tried to create an image of myself because I was trying to create something for social media. I wasn't trying to do anything weird like to make me look bad, obviously, but it was like just create a picture of Eric Kimberling from Third Stage Consulting, and I forgot what I was asking. It was some kind of background I wanted or whatever, and it wouldn't do it. It said you can't do it. I can't create a image of someone else per your request. I can't. It's just part of it. It can do it, but it's saying it won't do it basically. So I know that like OpenAI is trying to like self-regulate in that way. And I think if I'm the AI companies, I would do more of that because if you create tools that allow stuff like this, it's inevitable that the government's going to come after the tools themselves. So you might as well put the safeguards in place now. If you're an AI provider, you might as well just self-regulate yourself before the government starts mucking around with it. So that'd be my recommendation: is self-regulate and get ahead of it before the government decides for you, because usually the government's not going to have a better answer than you might have yourself, or at least that's just my personal opinion there.
Yeah, definitely. That makes sense. So just be a little bit more cautious on the front end, so then you maybe don't have to face those harsh penalties or regulations then from the government on that side. Just maybe implement a board that similar to OpenAI that has some regulations or social benefit, I guess.
Yeah. Do you know, in this case, how did they figure out? Do you know how they figured out that this was deepfake, that it wasn't really the principal in this example that you're talking about?
I'm not sure exactly how they figured it out, I guess. I would assume that they just, like, the principal probably instantly denied it, and then I'm sure there was some tracing of it. I don't know exactly how it came about, but definitely not a good situation. Not something that I would want to happen to me. I'm sure you wouldn't want that to happen to you, so definitely not a good situation.
Yeah, super interesting. I mean, I mean, AI is so powerful and at times can be so accurate that you wonder, like, how someone could prove that, hey, that's not me, or that really is a deep fake that's AI generated. But
and who
TBD,
does the tracking down at that point? Like, who tracks down who made the deep fake to actually find the person that did it and everything like that, which is a whole nother thing than when these happen.
Yeah, absolutely.
You definitely want to be able to hold people responsible for actions like these, but if you can't trace them down, then how are you going to be able to figure out who did it, I guess?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, super interesting. But kind of switching gears here, we're going to go to how Oracle is relocating again. Like you said, they recently relocated to Austin, and now they are moving again, I guess, to Nashville, Tennessee, for their world headquarters. This news came about, and the primary reason, I guess you could say, that they are moving is because they want to really focus on the healthcare industry. And Nashville, they think, is the spot for that, to really help them get into the electronic medical records and everything like that, and have more opportunity there. The Nashville campus is benefiting from $65 million in state incentives, and is expected to generate over 8,000 jobs and invest over $1 billion in the local economy there. So a good thing, I guess, for Nashville from that side. What is your thoughts on Oracle's added focus on the healthcare industry and the move to Nashville in general?
Yeah, well, I remember I was at an Oracle conference, coincidentally, when they announced that news. It was a conference they do for consultants and analysts, just to educate them on the product roadmap and where the company's headed and that sort of thing. And that news broke while we were there, and I thought that was super interesting. At the time, I thought someone was kidding when they told me, because I hadn't read the press release yet. But someone mentioned, "Did you hear Oracle's moving to Nashville?" And I thought, aha, that's funny, because they just moved to Austin like 2 or 3 years ago. But I didn't realize what the tax incentives were. I mean, the reason what they're spinning it at the conference I was at was what you said, which is the government focus. But obviously, it sounds like there's some pretty heavy tax incentives too, which is usually at play. So I think, I don't know. Part of me wonders, like, is it really worth moving your entire organization for one industry vertical, even if it is, one of your maybe it's even your most strategically important verticals in the future? That seems like a big expense and a big disruption to move everything for that one industry. But, Larry Ellison might know something I don't know, and obviously he knows what he's doing. He's built a multi-billion-dollar software company, and I have not, so I'm not going to question him too much. But I do think they clearly are focusing heavily on healthcare. I did not know Nashville was such a hub for healthcare, so that was interesting to learn. It seems like Oracle is focusing heavily on healthcare and government as well. So those seem to be two verticals they're pushing heavier into. So I think it makes sense. I mean, healthcare is not going anywhere. It's just going to become a booming business for years to come. So I imagine that's probably a high growth area for them, and makes sense from that perspective. I couldn't speak a whole lot about the move itself to Nashville and whether or not what the ROI would be there. It seems a little little suspect in terms of getting an ROI just by moving to be closer to an industry, knowing that it's a pretty dispersed industry as well. And Oracle's a huge company, and I don't know that it really matters where they're based, but that's not for me to decide, I suppose.
Yeah, interesting. But also, my other question that I have along with this is seeing that Oracle is really focusing on this healthcare industry. Do you think that will be a trend for other softwares or other companies in the software space to start focusing on the healthcare industry a bit more and start going down that vertical? Or do you think they are kind of going to stick to what they're currently doing?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't know for certain. I would think healthcare would be one of those that would be, one of the higher growth industries for years to come globally. I mean, you've got an aging global population and an increasing global population with increasing health issues and things like that. So I could see that being high growth when other industries might be stagnating. I mean, healthcare is one that's pretty safe to assume is going to keep growing and be pretty recession proof. So when times of turbulence are happening now with wars and economic uncertainty and things like that, the one thing it is certain is people are getting older and having more health issues, and I think healthcare is going to be fairly recession proof. So I imagine more organizations will do it, although I will say Oracle has already invested pretty heavily in the space when they acquired Cerner not too long ago, which is the healthcare focused software provider as well. So I know they're focusing heavily on being able to integrate with that BIC and some of the healthcare specific solutions that are out there in the marketplace as well. So it's a good question. We're curious to see how the other vendors handle it.
Yeah, and I think that'll be interesting to see once they move if it really does help them in that healthcare space and really grow in that vertical, I guess. If the move helps with that, I guess that'll be.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll see.
Yeah.
See how they do, of course.
Yes, of course. That is all for our newsworthy topics for the day. And I thought they were really interesting, especially the AI, but also Oracle moving again. I think that two quite different things, but very interesting.
Yeah, very interesting indeed. And we'll stay on the AI thread here as we get into our next conversation with Walker Reynolds from 4.0 Solutions. He's going to be on to talk about the future of manufacturing technology. And then after Walker's on the show, we'll talk about how much ERP software really costs. So stick around for that. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with more Transformation Ground Control. Steve, we've chatted before, but remind me and our audience a little bit more about Epicor and where you're focused these days.
Hey, Eric, yep, good to talk to you, and thanks for asking. So Epicor, what we do is we make and sell cloud software for the global supply chain. And when I say that, when a customer purchases our software, we're committed to running their day-to-day business. And this would include everything from finance and procurement to production and sales. It's a responsibility we take very seriously, and it's something I believe we're very good at. We've got an employee base that has the deep expertise to understand their business and run their business. We also compete against 2 or 3 of the largest software companies in the world. So it's not good enough for our products to be good. They have to be consistently great, and that's a really important focus for me. So great products, deep industry expertise. We also focus on the essential workers that make those businesses run. We like to say Epicor's got you covered from the shop floor to the top floor. And when we say that, we really mean it. So that's Epicor.
Yeah, makes total sense. And as a result, you guys have recently announced a financial milestone that you've reached, $1 billion in annual recurring revenue, which every investor wants to see, right, is that high recurring revenue number. What strategies have driven Epicor's growth and scale to help you reach this milestone? And congratulations, by the way.
Hey, thanks. Yeah, that's a big one for us. We're definitely proud of it, and it's something that, truth be told, very few software companies ever hit that point, and we've done it. I'd say that the biggest one has been keeping the customer at the center of that journey to the cloud. The journey to the cloud took a while, and for the 7 years I've been here, it's been a constant focus, and it's been going on longer than that. We'll say it was the better part of a decade to get to the cloud. I think that the primary driver for me and the company and the culture we've created is making sure that that customer is always at the center. It can be easy to be distracted by whatever the shining object is or a really slick technology, but you won't get derailed if you're talking to your customers and you're making sure that whatever you're working on they really value. And if you ignore that at your own risk, I think you do get derailed. I think a couple other things. One would be back to products. Good isn't good enough. We have to be great. We really have to have better products. And I think that reconciling what we do with the customers has been a big part of that. And then lastly, just having an organization that has shifted to the recurring revenue model. There are a lot of people, Eric, you and I are in the age range where license revenue was the model for a long time, and taking an entire company of 5,000 people and having a wholesale shift to where we really focus on recurring revenue in the cloud took a lot of work and a lot of training, and it took a lot of commitment both from the leadership and from the people who do the work here, our employees. Those would be my 3 key points of what it took to get here.
So it didn't happen overnight, is what you're saying.
It did not happen overnight. It didn't. No, sir.
The last thing you want to have happen is for your digital transformation to end up in court. I've been doing this for 20 years and I have seen everything. My name is Marcus Harris. I'm a software and technology attorney focusing my practice on drafting and negotiating software-related contracts and litigating software disputes across the country. Feel free to reach out to us at taftlaw.com. We'd love to talk to you about the litigation process and what you can expect.
Welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 172. My name is Eric Kimberling. You can find new episodes of this show every Wednesday by going to transformationgroundcontrol.com. The show is sponsored by Third Stage Consulting and produced by Major Tom Productions. I'm excited for our next guest. It's been a while, but he has been on the show before. He was on this podcast last year talking about Industry 4.0. And he's going to be talking about Industry 4.0 again here today, but in the broader context of just manufacturing technology in general, digital transformations for manufacturers and supply chain intensive companies throughout the world. He's someone that's well known in the manufacturing technology space. He's a great guy to know, and I highly encourage you to follow him on social media if you don't already. But joining me to have this conversation is Walker Reynolds from 4.0 Solutions. Walker, thank you for being here today.
Thanks, brother. Eric, it's always good to be here, man.
Yeah, good to have you back. This is our second podcast interview. And before we jump into the introduction here, I heard a rumor recently that you are going to be at the Digital Stratosphere Conference in October. Is this true?
Yeah, that rumor is true. It was actually just finalized. It's really funny you say that. I literally just saw the email thread confirming that we're going to do it. Like right before this, I was reading the email and I'm like, oh, I'm doing Stratosphere again. Awesome. So
you didn't even know about it till just now.
I didn't even. I mean, I'm glad I'm doing it. In fact, I loved the show. I told you I didn't tell you this, but we're putting on our own conference, a community conference next January.
Nice.
And last night in our committee meeting, when I was talking with the committee, I said, well, I'd really like the overall feel of the conference to be very similar to what Stratosphere was. So
nice.
Anyway, so that's how much I enjoyed Stratosphere last year. And
well, that's flattering. Thank you, and I loved having you there, and it's exciting to have you back at that conference. I'm glad your people let you know before I put you on the spot live in front of an audience here.
I literally just found out. I mean, not even 10 minutes before we got on.
That's funny. Well, for those that don't know you though, tell us a little about yourself and about 4.0 Solutions.
Yeah, so I'm a solutions architect. I've been in manufacturing 25 years this year. So I started my career working for the end user. So I did stints 5 years in mining, 2 years in the printing industry, 3 years in the steel industry, and 2 years in tier 1 automotive as an engineer. So I actually started out on the plant floor in mining. About 2 years into my mining career is when I moved into engineering. I went back to school, became a double E. And I've been in digital transformation my whole career. I mean, what I proselytize and what I talk about are solutions that I've built for manufacturers when I worked for the manufacturer. What I'm kind of known for is the architecture that is unified namespace. Unified namespace was originally just meant for me to solve my own problems, right? Make it easier when I worked for the manufacturer. I went into consulting starting in 2011, 2012. I think 2012 is when I went into consulting. I worked for a couple of integrators, and then I started my first firm in 2015, and we're 50 companies later now. So I'm 50 companies in. There's 2 primary companies I have in the industry: Intellic Integration, which is our engineering arm, and then 4.0 Solutions, where I'm at, which is education outreach. And we run iiot.university and the Industry 4 Discord server.
Nice. Very cool. Yeah, you've got you've done a lot here in the industry, not just with 4.0 solutions, but you mentioned you've got 50 different companies. But what I find interesting about you is you know, a lot of companies don't have a clear vision or purpose, but you guys do. Tell us a little bit about sort of what is your vision and purpose of what you're trying to accomplish, you know, at a personal level and obviously professionally as well.
So there's really two things. So number one, philosophically, all of my companies operate on the same 5 core principles of transparency, authenticity, expertise, humility, and servant leadership. That's in service of creating the type of place that people want to work. So rather than treating, I always thought about, I don't want to treat people like commodities, that I want to treat them like partners. And so the first philosophy is creating the type of place people want to be. That is where we want to be is the place where we can maximize the gifts we were born with, and then develop skills that we weren't born with. But our mission, my mission, overarching mission in all of my companies, is to help save and create middle-class jobs in the United States. And the reason why is because I want to do my part to continue to, I believe in all the principles that America was founded on. I believe in the principles of individualism and industry, in individual property rights. I believe in those things. And I believe that, I believe that the Lord blesses us with gifts. That's why we're all different. We're not all the same. We have different personalities. We have different strengths. We think differently. We communicate differently. And a lot of that we're born with. We have a responsibility, I think, to maximize those gifts. But part of what makes the United States so great is that America is in a place where the government, the society, our economics are designed to make everyone benefit when individuals maximize what they're born with. And so when I grew up in the 80s in upstate New York, so in the Northeast, when manufacturing was doing this big, massive exodus, and I got to see what happens when the middle class declines. So my mission is to help save and create middle-class jobs through manufacturing, through creating a thriving manufacturing sector. It's not bringing back manufacturing as it was, Industry 3, right? Everybody's on the plant floor, lots of manual labor, but doing a smart manufacturing of the future, Industry 4, where it's more skilled positions. There are more people at the skilled level, and there are fewer people at the unskilled level. And that's how we revitalize the middle class in the United States. All this stuff we see on CNN and all the strife and all that jazz, all that is a function of the decline of the middle class. And I'm just trying to do my part to reverse that.
Yeah, no, it's very, very cool. I mean, it's good to have. I mean, it's interesting that you have that personal connection and obviously an early formative thing that affected you young in life. You kind of have taken that here in your professional career to create.
I saw the impact of like literally what happens when manufacturing goes away. Like I saw it with my own eyes. My friends' parents, I grew up in a trailer park. My mom died when I was young. When my mom was 7, when I was 7, my mom got murdered by my stepdad, and I got adopted by a wonderful family, but with limited means. And, and my parents worked hard. We never wanted for anything. I never had hunger for dinner. Okay. So, but we lived very, very humbly. Okay. Seven people living in a 2-bedroom trailer when I was really little. Right. And I had a lot of friends who were middle class and upper middle class, and I was envious of their lives when I was a little kid, but I saw them lose everything. I saw them literally go from middle class and upper middle class families to literally their parents were like working in gas stations and on farms. Like it went from great benefits, great pay to working in gas stations and on farms. And that was simply because manufacturers, I mean, I don't remember growing up a single manufacturer opening in upstate New York, but I remember scores leaving. Yeah. And what it did, if you want to see the impact, just take a trip to upstate New York. Yeah. Just drive through upstate New York, drive through those communities and see what happened. And, so this is real for me. This is not, I feel like I have a moral obligation to do something. And so everything that we've done is built around that. It's built around being a force for good in industry. And sometimes that means I have to say things people don't like, because at the end of the day, the goal is to help save and create middle-class jobs. And sometimes that means I've got to say things that people just don't want to hear.
Yeah, but they need to hear it to be able to accomplish that mission that you're talking about. Yeah, very interesting. I think that's something similar. You and I have I don't know if we talked about this. My parents, when I was really young, they were teenagers, so they were 16 when I was born. I was not planned. It wasn't a traditional family in that way, but my dad worked at U.S. Steel in Gary, Indiana, before we moved to Colorado, and that same kind of thing. You saw the steel mill shut down. You saw the decimation of people's lives, and so it's pretty cool that you've kind of dedicated your life to that.
A little story there, right? Let's my stint. I worked for Nucor Steel, so my stint in the steel industry was at Nucor.
Okay.
And Dan D'Amico was the CEO of Nucor Steel while I was there. And and if you guys don't follow Dan D'Amico on Twitter and LinkedIn, you should. He's a very, very highly outspoken advocate for industry in the United States. D'Amico's leadership was, let's create a place where people can flourish. Like I don't know if most people know this, but U.S. Steel was a predominantly union. Most of their facilities were highly unionized. Why?
Right.
Because there was an antagonistic relationship between the leadership and the workers.
Yeah.
None of Nucor Steel's facilities were unionized. And the reason why was because D'Amico led in a way that wasn't antagonistic. Like what he did was he said, let's create the place where people can flourish. So if you look at my companies, the way that we compensate people, there's no limit to the amount of money you can make. The amount of money you make is a function of your contribution to the mission. And we measure that. Nucor Steel did the same thing. I actually took Nucor Steel's pay structure and I adopted it to my companies. And I have looked at, when I was growing up in upstate New York in the 80s, if you had asked leaders, right, hey, why is it manufacturing's moving away? Where is it going? Most people would say, oh, it's because of labor. It's unionization has made it so that it's too expensive and all this jazz.
Yeah.
And the question I would ask is, why did they unionize?
Right.
Yeah, I would be like, why did they unionize? Organizations that have really, really strong leadership that enable employees, that focus on enablement and respect of their workforce, they don't have a union problem. Okay.
Yeah.
There's no problem with labor when leadership enables labor. Right. And so part of that first philosophy I talked about, creating the type of place where people can flourish and want to work, is built on that philosophy. I tell my leadership team all the time, we have a responsibility to our team. Like don't ever take the intellectual shortcut. Oh, they're just a whiner, or don't ever do that. Yeah. Don't ever do that. Put yourself in their shoes, look at their perspective and ask the question, what do they need from us? What do they need from us? And there's a huge dichotomy across organizations as it relates to digital. You want to, because you're obviously going to ask the question, who is digital, who's not digital? I'll tell you what, there is a philosophy in the organizations who become digital, and that philosophy is one of enablement. It is one of our greatest resource in this organization are the frontline workers. That it's operations. They know what our problems are. We got to give them. It's our job to give them the tools to solve all of our problems. And so that's why that's important to this conversation. That leadership philosophy. There, I've been doing this exchange. I've gone really hard at Microsoft lately, right? And probably everybody's wondering, hey, why is Walker being so hard on Microsoft? The answer is because while I'm happy that Microsoft has come up with a new, it's Azure IoT operations, whatever it is, AIO. I'm glad I like their new approach, but I think the reason their previous approach to Azure IoT failed was because of leadership strategy and philosophy. So while they have a new shiny object in AIO and Microsoft Fabric, the leadership strategy and philosophy hasn't changed. And that is, they see customers as a means to an end, right? And I don't want to be too unfair to Microsoft, but the reason I'm pushing so hard is because I don't believe their strategy and philosophy lines up with what the market actually needs. And I'd like to see that change.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I'm going to come back to that point too. I've got a follow up for you on that thread, but maybe start at a real high level, Walker, and sort of building on what you're just saying about saving middle class jobs and really helping the manufacturing industry. You also dropped the word Industry 3.0 in your just a moment ago. You dropped that term, and I know you've said in some of your marketing collateral, you talk about how you started your journey based on the vendor's outdated focus on Industry 3.0, while you felt the need to focus more on Industry 4.0. Can you just help us unpack, for those that don't understand, what's the difference between Industry 3.0 and 4.0?
Yeah. So if we look at, I was having this conversation with Rob Tiffany on LinkedIn last night.
Okay, hold that thought, Walker. We're going to take a quick break. We're going to continue the conversation when we come back. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with more Transformation Ground Control.
If you are aiming for transformation success, turn to Third Stage Consulting Group. Third Stage's independent and technology agnostic consulting team helps clients define their digital strategies, define their roadmaps, and manage their transformations. With offices in the US, Europe, and Australia, our team helps the world's most forward-thinking organizations through their transformation pitfalls and risks. If you are embarking on a digital transformation or business change initiative, contact Third Stage Consulting to see how we can help you reach the third stage of transformation success. Learn more about us and download independent reports, videos, and other best practices at thirdstage-consulting.com.
Are you looking for ways to promote your product or service to enterprise technology decision makers and influencers throughout the world, like the ones who listen to this podcast? Major Tom Productions creates media, events, and influencer marketing for B2B technology providers. Our productions are exciting, educational, disruptive, and effective. Most importantly, they create results. Our content is unlike any other in this industry, engaging, influential, and trusted by technology buyers and influencers throughout the world. Each month, our productions reach hundreds of thousands of targeted buyers and decision makers who trust and engage with our honest and tech-agnostic content. With long-tail viral results and engagement with our content, Major Tom Productions provides a way to reach your target market and create awareness, calls to action, and a connection with potential customers. So collaborate with us today. Learn how we can feature your product or service on podcasts such as Transformation Ground Control, Journey to S4HANA, and Journey to Dynamics 365. We can also feature your brand on our YouTube channel called Digital Transformation with Eric Kimberling, which boasts over 100,000 subscribers and over 2 million video views per year. You can also participate in our in-person events, including our Digital Stratosphere Conference. Contact us today to learn more. We can tailor a marketing campaign that works for you. We look forward to helping more people learn more about and become engaged with your brand.
Welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode 172. My name is Eric Kimberling, here with Darian Chwialkowski. You can find new episodes of this show every Wednesday by going to transformationgroundcontrol.com. The show is sponsored by Third Stage Consulting and produced by Major Tom Productions. I'm here with Walker Reynolds. We're talking about the future of manufacturing technology.
Industry 3.0 and 4.0, those are actually like standards and philosophies, right? And they primarily originate in the EU. When we talk about that, when we say Industry 3 and Industry 4 here in the United States, we've conflated the terms. So there's the third industrial revolution and the fourth industrial revolution. And the strategies and the standards, Industry 3.0 and Industry 4.0, those are lagging behind the actual industrial revolution. So what's really important to understand is that generally in the United States, when we're saying Industry 3, Industry 4, we're also talking about the third industrial revolution and the fourth industrial revolution. If you're in the EU and you say Industry 3 and Industry 4, they are almost certainly talking about the standard and the specification that comes out of the EU on how to get the most out of the third industrial revolution, how to get the most out of the fourth industrial revolution. All right, with that caveat. So what's really important to understand is that the industrial revolutions are not something we created. They are things that happen when civilizations continue to advance. Okay, if we were to nuke the entire earth and just go right down to dirt, and we start with civilization all over again, and some species evolves and we industrialize, there will be an industry zero. There will be a point where we have the written word. Okay, for us, industry zero was the printing press. Without Gutenberg, that was the first information highway, the printing press. Okay, up until that point, you had scribes having to literally handwrite every single copy of a book, and because of that, books were incredibly expensive. They were not, the information was not democratized in any way, shape, or form. Gutenberg's printing press democratized the written word. Okay, the first industrial revolution was the steam engine. So now what we can do is we can use physics and mechanics to make work easier. The second industrial revolution was the assembly line. Okay. The third industrial revolution was the automation of industrial processes that the assembly line created. And the fourth industrial revolution was the convergence of IT and OT technology. So in 1998, TCP/IP won the protocol wars. So now you have a transport protocol that gives us the ability to create networks where everything can talk to one another. That was the rising edge of the fourth industrial revolution. All right. Companies who are industry 3, they have an industry 3 mindset. They are still operating under the mindset of when we were just automating the industrial process. That is putting a PLC. We think of each asset as its own standalone thing, and that it provides a specific function in the business. And the only thing we care about is that function. That is, what widget does it make? What step in the manufacturing process does it do? That's it. And you think about it, when you in the industry 3 mindset, your requirements end with the function. You do a functional acceptance test with a list of things that the machine must do. In industry 4, we are much more focused on the data that asset generates. Because industry 4 is about making data your primary commodity, taking all the events across your business and putting them together so that we can ask software to find patterns in that data and those events that we can't see with the naked eye, right? What is machine learning? Machine learning is computers learning from data. Artificial intelligence is computers mimicking human intelligence. In order for you to use machine learning and artificial intelligence, you must have a digital data infrastructure. You must collect every event. You must organize every event. You must contextualize every event. You must normalize every event in order to do those things. And that's what Industry 4 is about. And more importantly, I argue, it's what the unified namespace architecture is all about. It's all about giving you everything you need to unlock the potential of Industry 4 through enabling your employees to solve your business problems one at a time on a common infrastructure.
Right. And capturing that data and
right.
Connecting them into the network.
Yeah.
I'm going to come back to unified namespace here in just a moment, because I have a feeling, I sense that you have some pretty strong opinions about that, but let me come back to it.
Yes. Yeah.
But before I get to UNS, back to UNS, there's also this concept of Industry 5. How is that different? And what's that you're sort of looking forward to Industry 5? What is that? And how is it different from 4 and 3?
So there's a debate going on right now. Industry 5 we're still in that, arguing theoretically. I one of the greatest lessons my dad taught me a lot of stuff, and I talk about my dad all the time. I'm 50 years old, and I talk about the lessons I learned from my father.
Sure.
But one of the things that my dad used to say was that, you shouldn't fight theoretical battles. You should win the results war. Like, he would always say, don't debate people. Like, only debate once you have the proof, right? Because people it's very easy for people to just argue theoretical ideas and they're just talking past each other. He would always say, focus on the results. Okay. it's very important to understand that there are no results from Industry 5 or the fifth industrial revolution yet. It's all really theoretical. So there's no proof. Okay. So there's a debate going on as to what the fifth industrial revolution and Industry 5 will be. Okay. In the EU, the argument is it's all about people. Okay. It's about sustainability. That's all horseshit. Okay. It's wishful thinking. Okay. ESG comes from the concept of what we want Industry 5 to be. Okay. Now, not that ESG isn't a noble goal. It is, but it comes from the concept of what we want Industry 5 to be. Here's what Industry 5 actually is. This is what it will really be. The fifth industrial revolution's already started. Most people just don't know it yet. Okay. And it started in the fall of 2022 when GPT 3.5 really came out. Okay. And then GPT 4 came out after that. That is Industry 5 and the fifth industrial revolution is about the convergence of human and artificial intelligence. It's about making human beings superhuman beings.
Right.
And we're seeing this, and I'm sure you're seeing this with your employees. You have people who are really unlocking the potential of generative AI, and you have some people who aren't doing anything with it.
Right.
And the difference, the chasm between those two types of people, one is a superhuman, and the other one continues to fall further and further and further behind incrementally. That's what the fifth industrial revolution is all about. It's about turning us as people into superhumans. And imagine this world, right? Imagine this world. Imagine you go to a conference. Let's say you go to Digital Stratosphere in the fall, and I have a brain implant, or I'm wearing a heads-up display over a pair of glasses over my eyes. And when I walk into the room, okay, all I can choose to see a heads-up display on every person, what their name is, what their LinkedIn is, what their title is, what their experience is, and I can deep dive into that so that I could better select the people I'm going to have a conversation with. Okay. Right. Imagine you're in business development and you have that tool at your disposal, and you're going up against the person who's trying to hand out 500 business cards to 400 people, 399 which are going to throw that business card in the trash.
Right.
All right. That's the future. And by the way, the technology exists today. And that is all about taking artificial intelligence and combining it with human intelligence to make people better.
Right. Yeah. That's super interesting. Okay, hold that thought, Walker. We're going to take a quick break. We're going to continue the conversation when we come back. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with more Transformation Ground Control. I recently published my first book. It's called The Final Countdown, Strategies to Reach the Third Stage of Digital Transformation. And I wrote this book because I really wanted to find a concise way to share some of my knowledge around digital strategy and how to get started on a digital transformation journey. So in this book, I cover 3 different sections. I cover the people, process, and technology aspects of transformation, with the idea that it's meant to be a starting point, a launching pad for organizations and team members that are going through digital transformations. So I encourage you to buy this book. You can get it electronically, you can get it paperback, or you can get it in hard copy as I'm holding here in front of you. You can get it by going to thefinalcountdown.com. You can also search for it on Amazon if you shop at Amazon. Otherwise, just go to thefinalcountdown.com. Love to hear your feedback on this book as well. So I hope you check it out and hope you enjoy.
I'm excited to share our newly released 2024 Digital Enterprise Operations Report. This free download is available on the Third Stage website at thirdstage-consulting.com. This report is truly packed full of technology-independent and agnostic insights for your project to ensure that you're strategically optimized for success. Download your copy today with the QR code in front of me, or visit our website for more details.
These things take time, Mom and Dad, they have a good life. But what am I gonna do with mine?
Welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode 172. My name is Eric Kimberling, here with Darian Chwialkowski. You can find new episodes of this show every Wednesday by going to transformationgroundcontrol.com. The show is sponsored by Third Stage Consulting and produced by Major Tom Productions. I'm here with Walker Reynolds. We're talking about the future of manufacturing technology. Podcast co-host here, Darian on LinkedIn, says, what are some of the high skill positions you mentioned earlier that people should focus on if they want to work in Industry 4 or in Industry 5, as you're describing here?
All right, so that great question. I'm gonna rather than positions, I'll say this: all human beings will become citizen developers. So all of us who work in industry will become citizen developers. So that is through no code and low code applications. We are going to use technology to build useful technology for either me or other people. Similar to the way that everybody knows how everyone dabbles in Excel, right? And it doesn't matter where you work. Everyone dabbles in Excel. Right. Everyone dabbles with OneNote. Imagine that on steroids. That's what citizen development is, right? Everyone is going to be a citizen data analyst. Okay. So what's important is that people focus on digital fluency. So rather than the role itself, focus on digital fluency. So everyone needs to have a basic understanding of how code works. Do you have to write software? Of course not. But what I recommend people do is they go to Codecademy and they take a basic introduction course into Python. Okay. You could literally get all the digital fluency you need on software by just learning how Python, which is an interpreted language. I'm not going to get into those technical elements, but if you learn just how Python works and you can write a basic for loop in Python, that makes you digitally fluent in how software works. Okay. I think everyone needs to understand the concept of data operations. So converting just a raw event or a series of raw events into something that could inform me. So for example, a temperature, if I look at a temperature as a snapshot, so that is all I see is a number. It's the event. If I don't know that that has a unit of measure called Fahrenheit, then I don't know what the temperature actually is. That is data operations. Data operations is taking the temperature off of a sensor and adding in something else to turn it into information. Okay. If you have to have a basic understanding of data operations, I think you have to have a basic understanding of the software development lifecycle. So, and the reason software development lifecycle, it's because it's the most mature. You need to understand the concept that everything that all solutions, all problems I solve are going to be standing on the shoulders of all the other problems I've already solved. So as opposed to taking them as a standalone entity, right? Stand all by themselves. I think those are the things that people need to be focused on. And then what you do is you figure out how to apply those things to your domain of expertise already. And if you look at the breadth of our business, I'll focus on business development because they're generally the least technical people, right? We have our business development staff ranges in ages from early 60s all the way down to maybe 30 is the youngest. And if you look at the way our 63-year-old business developer, who by the way is a world-class sales guy, been doing it 30 plus years, absolutely slays it at every conference. He can sell $5 million in his sleep. I mean, the guy's just a beast, an absolute animal. If you look at how he does his job relative to how a 30-year-old business developer does her job, it's night and day. They're completely different. And the difference is he focuses a lot more on brute force, 100 calls a day, that kind of stuff.
Right.
And
Traditional way.
And she focuses on quality over quantity. And she's not a whale hunter, nothing like that. But she focuses on, let me start with the quality lead first and asking the question, how do I get the quality lead? And she uses technology to do that, right? She's focused on technology. Whereas the older sales guy is focused on the notebook and the Rolodex. And so to answer your question, what position should be focusing on? I wouldn't focus on the position. I would focus on the skill set, digital fluency, the stuff I laid out, and then figure out how to apply that to what it is you do.
Right. Yeah, it makes total sense. Yeah, it's more of a mindset, cultural shift, and you're setting that foundation to be able to adapt to the things we can't predict right now.
I was watching an interview this morning, and my habit is I wake up, I read, I go through a series of newspapers, I check my emails, I check my Discord messages, and then somebody had sent me an interview. Steve Martin did 2 decades ago, the comedian. Somebody had asked him, how do you break in? What do you tell people when they ask you how to break into Hollywood? And he said, well, there's no way you don't just break into Hollywood. He's like, you get discovered. And the way you do that the way you do that, number one, is start by understanding that your expectations of the job is never what the job actually is. Number two, be so good no one can ignore you. That's what digital does.
Right.
Digital makes it impossible for the gatekeepers to ignore you.
Right.
Like if you figure out a way to leverage digital, look at me. I can be a jerk. And a lot of it's by design, but I could be a jerk. You know what I mean? And but because of what I've done with digital, people can't ignore me. I'm a perfect case study. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Super interesting.
Yeah.
Now, here's a question from, and actually I'm going to lead into a question or a topic I've heard you talk about before, Walker, but this question that I'm going to start with is from Vaughn on LinkedIn. Vaughn says, how will AI affect the way people work in the future? What impact will it have on the jobs humans do? And I remember you talking, I think it was in our last podcast interview, you talked about the IQ, the average IQ of the average laborer, the average, not the laborer, but the average person in the labor force. How do you think AI is affecting people's jobs just in general and the skills they need to have other than that digital fluency that you're talking about?
Yeah. If you look, I mean, communication skills are really important. Your ability to communicate with artificial intelligence is really critical. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where the IQ piece comes in. So right now, the average employable IQ is around 73. That's set by the U.S. Army. We know empirically, if we look at the way that skill sets change over time, the impact that artificial intelligence is going to do is AI and machine learning and automation are going to engineer out the positions that the IQs from 73 to the 90 work in. Okay. Artificial intelligence is what's going to end up happening is the average employable IQ is going to be somewhere in the mid 90s, which right now is about the mean in the West. Okay.
Right.
So what's going to happen is your entry level position is going to be the person who's on the mean in intelligence. Right. So that's a person who can think in abstract terms. So I can think in multiple layers. They can play chess. They're not limited to checkers. Okay. Right. So they can see multiple moves in the future, but also they have significant communication abilities. That is, they have the ability to speak effectively and they have the ability to write effectively. And that is the fundamental difference. It's going to make people who communicate in writing better at communicating and writing. And it is going to make them the time to value when they're solving problems is going to get shorter and shorter and shorter.
Right. Yeah. Very interesting. Now, I want to come back to this unified namespace. And there's actually some questions coming in from the audience already about UNS. So let's just dive into that here for a second. First of all, I know you've got some strong opinions about unified namespace. Before we get into those, though, tell us about what unified namespace is and what your strong opinions related to it are.
Sure. So unified namespace is an architecture I created between 2003 and 2005 in that salt mine I worked in. And it came from the problem of the salt mine is 7 miles long. Okay. And when I'm on shift, I'm the only technician on shift to cover the entire mine. Okay. We have all this smart stuff talking to each other over Data Highway Plus. So the blue hose. So a serial network. We have all this stuff talking to each other. It's on a network, but not the network because we weren't using Ethernet at the time. How can I take all that data and put it in a place where I can quickly retrieve the information I'm looking for when someone calls about a problem? So when someone calls and says, hey, belt 40B, section A is out. It's just stopped. We have an indicator, a little light bulb on the thing. It's not running. How can I diagnose the problem without having to drive out there and look? How can I diagnose the problem first, then drive out there and fix? Okay. So, or fix from where I'm at. So unified namespace was all about organizing our business. First off, semantically organizing everything in a hierarchy, the way the business is structured, and then capturing all the events and then being able to manipulate that data into information for me. So how could I put together all the data points I need to diagnose that call when someone makes it? Okay. That's what unified namespace is. It is a architecture that is semantically organized. Think of it as a file share where all of the events in your business are coalesced. So every IO data point, the work order from the active work order from the ERP, the bill of materials we're using right now, all that stuff organized generally as ISA 95 Part 2, which is enterprise site area line cell. And then we organize it based on function. So I might have an OEE namespace that's got the OEE calculation in it.
Right.
It provides context, all data in current context, and fully normalized, and it gives you current state. That's what unified namespace is. It is built on a common technology. So a unified namespace in general, we're using like broker technology. The most common is MQTT. That's what UNS is. It's an architecture that is the digital foundation of your infrastructure upon which you plug in all your software and you consume and produce into that unified namespace to solve problems for the business. We were talking about Odoo earlier here, right? You guys are in the ERP business. You guys did a video on Odoo called We Don't Talk About Odoo, right? Why is Odoo disrupting the ERP industry? You want to know one of the reasons why it's disrupting? Because you can plug Odoo into a unified namespace.
Right.
You can build an MQTT connector so it can produce and consume from a UNS. So you can extract from Odoo things like bill of materials, manufacturing operations, all those kind of things into a unified namespace. It's one key reason why Odoo is disrupting, right? But here's another reason. It's low code, no code. Mm-hmm. So that it can support citizen developers and citizen data analysts. So you guys even shot your own video on this and think about it. When we were at Digital Stratosphere, Epicor was there, right?
Right.
When I had a conversation with the new leadership at Epicor, I think they came from Oracle, right? And she was fucking amazing. I mean, really, sorry. She was amazing, right? And one of the things when I was talking to Epicor, I was talking to the executive leadership at Epicor about this. She acknowledged, she said, the age of putting ERP at the center of your business is over. ERP is a function of the business. It's a node in the business. It needs to produce and consume. Even she was talking about the need for a unified namespace. But anyway, that's what UNS is.
Okay, hold that thought, Walker. We're going to take a quick break. We're going to continue the conversation when we come back. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with more Transformation Ground Control. People oftentimes ask me how I built such a strong social media following on YouTube and LinkedIn and Facebook and other outlets. And the fact of the matter is it took me a long time to build a following through a lot of trial and error, making a lot of mistakes. Had I known that there were companies out there that could help me build my brand, I would have done that a long time ago. I didn't know that, but the good news is that there is today a consulting firm that will help you through building your own personal brand through some of their training programs. The company is called Roloff Consulting, and if you're familiar with Emma Roloff, she's someone that I've had on this podcast before, and she's well known in the digital transformation space as well as the sales space, and she's big on TikTok, YouTube, and LinkedIn. And she and her husband have started a training course and a training company that focuses on helping people build their personal brands and helping them to sell themselves digitally. So whether you're a salesperson that's trying to reach more customers or you're an individual that's just trying to build your personal brand, that's something that they help with through their training programs. And they've offered listeners of this podcast a free 5-day LinkedIn challenge. And I encourage you to check it out. I've included a link below for this podcast. If you go to the podcast notes, you'll find a link that gets you free access to this 5-day challenge where you'll get step-by-step guidance. You'll get real results. So you'll get some tangible results from the program. And you also get a special offer at the end of it. So it's exclusive to listeners of this podcast. Be sure to check out the link below if you want to work on building your personal brand, or if you're in sales and you're trying to reach more people. Whatever the case may be, check it out. It's free to listeners of this podcast. You can check it out via the link below.
Interested in working for a company that truly values your unique skills and experience? Here at Third Stage, we don't hire based on resumes alone. We look at the full candidate, experience, and willingness to provide excellent service for our clients. Within a technology, independent, and agnostic consulting firm, you have the opportunity to learn across industries with a diverse group of clients. Our consultants also have the opportunity to diversify their portfolio and learn across technology systems. If you're interested in joining a high-growth entrepreneurial organization, please reach out to us at work@thirdstage-consulting.com.
Welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode 172. My name is Eric Kimberling here with Darian Chwialkowski. You can find new episodes of this show every Wednesday by going to transformationgroundcontrol.com. The show is sponsored by Third Stage Consulting and produced by Major Tom Productions. I'm here with Walker Reynolds. We're talking about the future of manufacturing technology. Is this a universal concept? It sounds like, there's maybe some different philosophical views on is UNS the right answer or not. And, I guess my question is, why is there pushback, or why isn't this more universally adopted, or is it becoming universally adopted at this point?
It's becoming, we just got back from Hanover Messe, and UNS was everywhere. Everywhere. Companies I never even heard of. Right? In general, most people who want to make sure that their product supports a unified namespace, generally they'll reach out to us, or they'll reach out to a member of our community, or they'll join the Discord server and ask the Industry 4 community to kind of vet the product. But I even saw products I've never even heard of, using unified namespace and UNS in their language. And most of them that I looked at, there were some that were just full of it, but most of the companies who are saying UNS they have the definition relatively right. The definition is loose. It's not a standard, and it was designed to be flexible. It's designed to UNS is built under the concept that there is one thing in manufacturing and industry that matters, and only one thing, and it's production. And on the plant floor, you do whatever it takes to get the widgets out the back door. No one, absolutely no one on the plant floor ever says, we can't do that because the ERP doesn't allow us to do that.
Right. So we're going to stop shipping product.
Yeah. They just, no one has ever done that. I've seen it with my own eyes. Hey, it says we're supposed to go here, 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 here. Well, that step right there, that machine's broken. And so we're going to literally run this production halfway through that asset. Then we're going to move the work in progress over to that asset, and we're going to finish on that asset. Guess what? Most ERP systems don't support that mitigation tactic, right? Unified namespace was designed to be able to at least consume the events when you take that mitigation tactic, right? But also to be a single source of truth for your business. Where do we currently stand? When we do a DTMA, digital transformation maturity assessment, we're gauging digital maturity of organizations. We do these 23-point questionnaires and interview people in the organization. We're basically asking, what are you good at? What are you bad at? What's missing? Do you want to know what we've done? Almost 10,000 surveys total. So we have a large longitudinal sample. Do you know what 91% of respondents in manufacturing say is their biggest problem, the biggest what's missing?
Let me guess. Data?
It's the access to the data they need to do their job. 91%. 9 out of 10. Now, they may say it differently. It might be the supervisor might say something like, well, what I need is visibility into current state. That is, what are my assets are running? Where are we relative to plan? What he's saying is access to the data I need, but he may say it in a different way. 91% of respondents across the entire organization say the same thing. Access to the data they need to do their jobs. You want to know the best way to find out what an organization's problems are?
What's that?
Ask them for all the spreadsheets they built to solve problems.
Right.
You just ask me, let me look at the spreadsheets. The spreadsheet is always a functional solution to a specific business problem. And if you can inventory all those things, you know what the business's problems are.
Right. That's a great point. Yep. But a lot of times software vendors are trying to sell you software, say, don't worry about those spreadsheets. You don't need to worry about that.
Well, this is where our new conference, we're going to do Prove It. We're doing this conference in January next year, right? And by the way, I was originally going to reach out to you and say, hey, why don't we do this at Stratosphere? Why don't we do what we're going to try and do at Prove It at Stratosphere? The only reason I didn't was because our key sponsor requires that it's in Dallas because they're a Texas-based company. And actually, their headquarters are in Dallas. So, but otherwise, I would have reached out to you. But we're doing this conference in January called Prove It, a whole new approach to conferences, and where we're gonna send all the vendors who are going to participate, and we're going to ask them to come and prove it that their solution can support a unified namespace. It can plug into an existing infrastructure, and it can start producing and consuming. And there are all these rules centered around it, like what we're going to do with the vendors. But why are we doing that? And the answer is Because if you go to the average conference, one of the reasons I loved Stratosphere so much is because we talked about actual problems. We talked about actual use cases. We talked about the actual limitations in digital. We talked about the actual successes.
Right.
Most conferences are designed to trick executives. It's
Right.
flashy. It's flash. It's marketing. It's designed to stand up your booth as quickly as possible, tear it down as quickly as possible, and go to the next conference and trick people with flash again.
Right.
I was at IFPAC, which is the largest life sciences conference in the United States. I spoke there in Washington, D.C. a couple of months ago. And they had a poster session where they had maybe 50 vendors in the exhibit hall. And I went through the exhibit hall and I asked, and all of them were selling to the same customers, right? They're all selling digital solutions. And what question do you think I asked them? I went and I said, how do I plug your thing? How do I connect your thing with his thing?
Right.
And the answer invariably was, well, we might have a connector for that, or we have an SDK, or you can't. And what blew my mind was that all of you are trying to sell stuff to the same customers, and yet none of you talk to each other.
Yeah.
Like,
it's super fascinating.
That's not digital. Go ahead. Sorry, man.
Right. Yeah. And it's almost as though, there's an assumption that my one solution is going to solve all your problems, when for most manufacturers, that's not true. You're going to need, like you said, ERP is not going to be the center stone. You're likely going to need multiple systems. You're still going to have some spreadsheets. You might still have manual processes. You've got to be realistic about what it is you're doing with
what people need to understand is that it's a journey. It's not a project. Digital transformation is a strategy. It's a strategy. It's not a project, and it's a journey. It's a journey that makes your organization smarter through making data the primary commodity.
Right.
You're not collecting the data for data's sake. You're collecting the data to turn it into information so that you can get smarter.
Right.
And as you get smarter, what you want changes. What we want is a function of what we know. And so if you look at the journey, organizations start really, really small. At least they should start tiny. They shouldn't be spending more than $40,000, $50,000 at the absolute most in the first 12 to 16 weeks of their digital journey. And that's proof of value.
Right.
But 3 years down the road, they've spent millions. Why? And they've gotten tens of millions in return. And why is that? Because they started small and they charted a path that allowed them to adjust as they exponentially got smarter, and their needs and wants changed by knowledge squared.
Right.
Yeah.
And as you learn, you start doubling down on those lessons and saying, okay, now we figured it out, or we kind of know directionally where we're going. Now let's start spending our millions of dollars rather than out of the gates. Let's just commit.
If you're spending your millions of dollars on scaling the solution that you've already quantified the ROI on.
Right. And proven out.
Yeah.
It's a great philosophy. So I think you've alluded to this quite a bit here, Walker, but maybe we'll just dive into a little bit more here. This is from Demetrios on YouTube. Demetrios says, how can UNS offer some quick wins to small manufacturers, or just manufacturers in general? What are some of the quick wins? You talk about starting off small. What are some ways that manufacturers can be using UNS to get business value?
Yeah, I'll give you an example. So we have a manufacturer based here in Dallas who they originally brought us there. We're a Kepware partner. And so they found us like on Kepware's website. They called us. Kepware is a device drivers and data aggregator that has an OPC server, if you're not familiar with it, although most people are. So they bring us there because they want us to use Kepware to connect to their equipment. And what they wanted to do was use the Kepware's transaction tool to basically store some data in a database and build some data dashboards in Grafana. Real simple, but it was linear. Connect this data point and store it in this table, then have Grafana call it from that table, right?
Right.
What we did that was a small manufacturer, does $25 million a year. What we realized when we walked the plant floor was, wow, these guys are in the Stone Ages. They've got state-of-the-art technology. They got a $20 million printing press over there that's got Siemens D445 motion control on it, like state-of-the-art XML-DA servers. There are hundreds of thousands of data points on that machine. There's a database running on that machine that has tracked the input from the HMI, from a Beckhoff HMI, for the last 5 years. And they have no idea that data's there. They have no idea. Wow. So what I did was we went to the owner of the company and I said, I want access to that press. And I want to show you for the next 12 weeks, you give me access to the press and you give me access to people who will answer any question. and we'll show you the art of the possible on that press. Here are the rules. I'll pay for it, so you don't pay a penny. I'll bring my own servers in. I'll do everything. Me and one of my other engineers. You have no say in what we build. We're building the art of the possible. You don't give any feedback until the 12-week mark. Okay. If you like it, you buy it and we do the rest of the facility. If you don't, we'll rip it out and it didn't cost you a penny. The first thing we did for that small manufacturer was build a unified namespace. We structured the business. We put that press in there, press 103. We created a functional namespace called a line, one with OEE and MES. And then we literally built an endpoint that was the XML-DA endpoint that came from the D445 motion controller, and it brought in all the data points off that motion controller. Then what we did was we built an OEE functional namespace that could consume the state of the machine, the waste it was generating, the in-feed coming off the film unwinder, the out-feed coming off the film winder from the printed film winder, and then we calculated OEE, and then we tracked a bunch of stuff from that database. We brought that in as a data set. And then we went to the customer, and before we ever demoed any of the solutions, we showed them the business and the data organized in a way they could understand. Why? Because it looks like a file share. It looks like a thing that they deal with all the time. So what they realized was, oh, unified namespace is a way of me finding the data I'm looking for, organizing it in a way where I can find the data I'm looking for, even if I don't know that data exists. So I wonder what the tunnel temperature is inside that printing press. My unified namespace is structured in a way where I know where to go to see if that even exists.
Right.
That's how small manufacturers benefit from unified namespace. And think about it. That 12 weeks was the most valuable 12 weeks that company has ever experienced. And today they generate $50 million in revenue. Same assets, they literally doubled their production. They didn't work harder. They doubled their production by becoming smarter. And and that started with a small unified namespace on one asset.
Got back to that data, access to data challenge, the 91% metric that you mentioned.
Too many vendors are speaking a language operations don't understand. When I was in Hanover Messe last week, I had a conversation with a young guy. I wish I remembered his name. I have a photo of him. I could probably look it up. But he said, he follows us, and he said, I take what you said and I've created like my own. I want to attribute the statement to him. I just can't remember the kid's name, the young guy's name. He's 24 probably. He said my biggest frustration, he's in vegetable oil refinery, and they're building a brand new greenfield in the Gulf of Mexico or whatever. And they have one in Spain. They have a refinery in Spain. And he was talking about the challenges of explaining to people the value of digital in operations. He said, it's like going back to 1870 and trying to explain to people the value of electricity when they've never experienced it.
Right.
It's like it's speaking a language that operations doesn't understand. If you want to know the fundamental problem in our industry, besides the rampant corruption, and exploitation in our industry, which is, it's horrible. And you and I agree here that this is a major problem, corruption and exploitation in our business. Martin, thank you, Vaughn. The biggest issue is the OEMs are, whether they're doing it intentionally or unintentionally, for a moment, let's not be cynical. They are speaking a language that operations doesn't speak. And therefore they are trying to sell them tech for tech's sake, rather than starting with the customer's problem and working their way back to the tech that they need.
Okay, hold that thought, Walker. We're going to take a quick break. We're going to continue the conversation when we come back. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with more Transformation Ground Control.
Just tell me what you've got to say. Tell me, I've been waiting for so long to hear.
I'm excited to share our newly released 2024 Digital Enterprise Operations Report. This free download is available on the Third Stage website at thirdstage-consulting.com. This report is truly packed full of technology-independent and agnostic insights for your project to ensure that you're strategically optimized for success. Download your copy today with the QR code in front of me or visit our website for more details.
Hi, this is Eric Kimberling with Third Stage Consulting and your host of Transformation Ground Control. I want to encourage you to read our Guide to Organizational Change Management. It's a free report or free guide that we publish. It's one that I actually wrote that talks about best practices and lessons learned as it relates to change management. So as you know, on this podcast, we cover a lot of stuff related to the human sides of change, organizational change management, including training, communications, org design, all kinds of stuff as it relates to change management. So if you're trying to learn more about change management, or you're looking for more direction and ideas on how to get started on your change management strategy and your overall journey, be sure to check out this guide. You can read it by scanning the QR code on the screen in front of you, or in the links below for this particular podcast episode. You can find a link to take you to the page that will allow you to register to go ahead and download that and read it for free. So be sure to check it out. It's the Guide to Organizational Change Management, written by yours truly. I hope you enjoy it. Let me know what you think, and hope you enjoy the rest of this episode. Welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode 172. My name is Eric Kimberling, here with Darian Chwialkowski. You can find new episodes of this show every Wednesday by going to transformationgroundcontrol.com. The show is sponsored by Third Stage Consulting and produced by Major Tom Productions. I'm here with Walker Reynolds. We're talking about the future of manufacturing technology. Yeah, it's a great point, and I think that's even more pronounced with AI now. I mean, you think about all the stuff we talk about, generative AI, data hallucinations, and it's like, what are you talking about? Like, I just want to know how to get the product out the door.
You do hallucination. When people ask me, is AI going to replace human beings? No. Yeah. Are there some positions that AI is going to be able to effectively replace? Probably, but that's going to be the exception, not the rule. Right. The rule is going to be hallucination makes this the case, by the way. For those of you who don't know what hallucination is, it's basically AI getting it wrong, creating a thing and insisting something is true when it's not true. That's a hallucination. That's where the human being comes in. That's where the domain expert comes in. What it is we become AI supervisors. AI is a lever for making human beings better. But the human being is still the last point of failure. You can't allow artificial intelligence to just take over, because artificial intelligence hallucinates. It gets it wrong. Right. The human being, the domain expert, the human supervisor is going to be the final gatekeeper to implementing something that artificial intelligence suggests we should implement.
Right. Gets back to that communication too. Being able to communicate with AI is another important skill.
Correct. Very important. Very important.
Yeah. Now, speaking of strong opinions, more strong opinions, Microsoft versus Google. I've seen you post recently just on LinkedIn about kind of your thoughts on how the dichotomy or the difference between how Microsoft and Google are approaching manufacturing technology and manufacturers' needs. What are your opinions here? How do you summarize your opinions here?
Yeah, I'm actually going to summarize it in two conversations. Okay. So at Hanover Messe last week, I had a chance. In the interest of full disclosure, we've been working with Google on a technology called MDE, their technology called MDE. So Google is a strong believer in partners. Like, Google doesn't think they have all the answers. And so they work with lots of partners they don't have strategic partnerships with. So that is, I don't get it. There's no financial benefit for me to say anything good about Google, other than we have architects where we're selling their labor to Google in consulting services. But there's no capital gain for us other than we've sold the labor. All right. Google believes heavily that there's no way that they can be the domain expert for industry. Google understands what it is they're good at and what they're not good at. That's the foundation of humility, right?
Right.
So here, Microsoft doesn't understand that. Microsoft, when they say that they work with partners, and I don't want to beat up Microsoft too much, but Microsoft's really, really good at building software, right? They're good at building things like Excel and OneNote. Microsoft is terrible at industry, and probably of all the organizations in the world, they are the most terrible. You want to know why Google is a little better at understanding the problems in industry? It's because they build shit. Microsoft doesn't actually manufacture any of their stuff. Microsoft's not in the business of manufacturing. They have partners that are in the business of manufacturing, strategic partners that they financially benefit from. But I had two conversations at Hanover Messe, both with incredibly brilliant architects. Okay. One was a guy named Clemens who's the principal architect of the new ADX platform at Microsoft, and he's like the messaging queue expert there. Brilliant dude, world-class architect, highly, highly, highly respected. Okay. And then another guy named Gregor at Google, who is also a brilliant, gifted, world-class architect. Two architects on the exact same level. Those conversations couldn't possibly have gone more different. And those conversations went differently because of the strategy and philosophy of the organizations they work in. Microsoft's philosophy, and this is the biggest issue. Microsoft they believe they know everything, and it's their blind spot. Their blind spot is they believe that, there's that famous video where the developer at Apple Days was critical of Steve Jobs, and he was like, what do you know about OpenDoc and all this stuff? And Jobs says, you can make some people happy some of the time. And then he goes in and he says, I don't need to know the value of OpenDoc. What I need to know is, does the customer want this? Right. And he tells a story about the first laser printer. And he says the reason that laser printer is amazing technology is because the customer wanted this. It printed a thing that I could go to the customer and go, do you want this? It didn't matter what the awesome technology was in the print controller. It was irrelevant. It was a tool. It was a tool to solving the customer's problem. Do you want this? Microsoft does not understand that. Google does. Google understands what the customer's problem is. And the customer's problem is that the customer only knows what some of their problems are. Microsoft wants to tell the customer what their problem is and then just sell them a thing for it. That's the fundamental issue. Wonderful people, brilliant, gifted people work at Microsoft. Brilliant, gifted people work at Google. But the difference is the approach, the philosophy, and the strategy. And right now, it is impossible for me to recommend to anyone that they should be working with Microsoft in industry. It's impossible. And my team was appalled when we had the conversation with Microsoft, 6 of us. When we walked away, we said, now we really know what the problem is. When I asked them, why did Azure IoT fail? You know what they said?
What?
Because no one bought it.
Right.
Honestly. Now you're the chairman of an organization. And if you were to ask your chief experience officer, hey, why did that product that we were offering to the market, why did that fail? If your CXO said to you, well, because no one bought it.
Yeah.
What would you say? You'd say, why didn't they buy it?
Yeah. Why? What's wrong with the product?
What's wrong with the product? Microsoft said the reason it failed was because no one bought it. I'll tell you why no one bought it. Here's what happened. Up front, Azure IoT, and I don't want to bash them, but this is an important thing for the industry to understand. The values of the organizations you work with matter.
Right.
What they believe, what their mission is, what their values are, what their strategy is, and what their philosophy is, it matters. You need to ask those 4 questions. And if you get a deer in headlights, run.
Right.
Okay. So Microsoft starts with, we have the largest CRM in the world. We can get a meeting with anyone. Okay. I've got some new technology that we've invested $50 million in developing. Let's find a market. Let's find a market to exploit. You know what Google does? And AWS, by the way, let's give AWS their credit, and Snowflake. Okay. You want to know what they do?
What's that?
They start with a customer problem and they work their way back to a specific solution. Right. But they build that specific solution on a platform. And once they've built 10, 12, 15 solutions on one platform, now they have something they can wrap into a product to sell to more customers who have that same 12 to 15 problems. Right. Microsoft doesn't do that.
They start with the technology and they just dive straight into the technology, and they become purist about what the technology solution should be versus what the customer needed.
When I was talking to the architect at Microsoft, this guy Clemens, who by all accounts is an unbelievably gifted architect, and he is brilliant. He never once asked what the problem was. Right. When I sat down and had coffee with Gregor, our team sat down and had coffee with Gregor. All Gregor asked me about was what the manufacturer's problems were. It was glaring. It was as if Microsoft thinks they know what all the problems are, because we're Microsoft. And Google, which by the way, you would think Google would be the same way. They're not. The philosophy, the strategy is totally different. It's let's go find out what the problem is.
Right.
Yeah.
And then solve it.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then solve it. And then solve maybe 10 or 12 of them and package that as a solution.
Right. So you obviously, you're talking to a lot of customers every day, a lot of manufacturers throughout the world. You're out on the speaking circuit, talking at conferences. What are some of the most important things that manufacturers need to know about just Industry 4, digital transformation, Industry 5, AI, all the stuff we're talking about here today? What are the most important things that manufacturers need to know and understand about operations tech over the next 2 to 3 years?
So let's do three. I'll do three. So number one, first and foremost, you must know that digital transformation is a strategy that manifests in a journey that never ends because it's in service of making data the primary commodity in your business. And if you want to know what that means, look at Tesla, look at Amazon. Amazon predicts what you're going to buy 6 weeks before you buy it. And that's how they get it to you in 48 hours or less at the best price, because they're never paying a premium on shipping. They're never, right? That's how they're doing it. And they're using ML and AI to do that. Data is the primary commodity. Okay. Number two, mission and values really, really matter. So, for example, as a manufacturer, when you're deciding who your partners are, you better know what their mission is and what they believe, because this is a relationship. It's a journey you're going to go on together. Okay. And they better have your best interest at heart. So you how do you vet that? You ask the questions about mission and values. Obviously, you ask the question about strategy and philosophy, but here's another way to do it. Ask them how much, how long, and what's the TCO? How much is this going to cost me in capital expenditure up front for the first 12 months? How long is it going to take before I see the first value? And number three, what will be the total cost of ownership? If they cannot tell you that and give you that answer, if they can't give you that answer immediately, then the answer is it's going to cost however much they can convince you to spend.
Right.
Okay. And number three, your pathway to security in your business is through digital fluency. Okay. Your number one risk in your business is not using technology to expose you to Russian hackers. Okay. Your number one risk in your business are operating a business that only needs people who don't know how to read email, who will put a fob into a port and not know any better, who will click on an attachment and not know any better. Amazon and Tesla do not have a problem with people clicking on attachments, okay, and infecting the inside of your network. Digital fluency is your path to security.
Yeah.
Those are your three absolute things. What I will say is this: if you don't have a digital strategy statement, anybody who's listening to this, you're a manufacturer, you're in industry, I want you to go to the highest ranking person in your organization, and I want you to ask them, what is our digital strategy? And if they can't give it to you in 3 sentences or less immediately, then you don't have a digital strategy, and that's where you start.
Thank you, Walker. Great conversation. It's good to have him on the show as always, and look forward to the next time he's on, and also look forward to seeing him at our Digital Stratosphere Conference in October, which is going to be in Denver, Colorado. Stay tuned for more info on that. We're going to continue to talk more about it on this podcast. We'll share with you more information, more about the agenda as it unfolds. But in the meantime, you can go to stratosphere2024.com to learn more about the event. In fact, you can start buying tickets at that same site as well. It's stratosphere2024.com. You'll get to see Walker there amongst many other speakers that will be at that tech agnostic digital transformation event. So be sure to check that out. So I've got a lot more to cover. It was a great conversation with Walker. We're going to debrief here in just a moment, and then we're also going to get into how much ERP software really costs. So stick around. We'll be right back with more Transformation Ground Control.
Could you whisper in my ear?
If you are aiming for transformation success, turn to Third Stage Consulting Group. Third Stage's independent and technology agnostic consulting team helps clients define their digital strategies, define their roadmaps, and manage their transformations. With offices in the US, Europe, and Australia, our team helps the world's most forward-thinking organizations through their transformation pitfalls and risks. If you are embarking on a digital transformation or business change initiative, contact Third Stage Consulting to see how we can help you reach the third stage of transformation success. Learn more about us and download independent reports, videos, and other best practices at thirdstage-consulting.com.
Steve, we've chatted before, but remind me and our audience a little bit more about Epicor and where you're focused these days.
Hey, Eric, yep, good to talk to you, and thanks for asking. So Epicor, what we do is we make and sell cloud software for the global supply chain. And when I say that, when a customer purchases our software, we're committed to running their day-to-day business. And this would include everything from finance and procurement to production and sales. It's a responsibility we take very seriously, and it's something I believe we're very good at. We've got an employee base that has the deep expertise to understand their business and run their business. We also compete against 2 or 3 of the largest software companies in the world. So it's not good enough for our products to be good. They have to be consistently great, and that's a really important focus for me. So great products, deep industry expertise. We also focus on the essential workers that make those businesses run. We like to say Epicore's got you covered from the shop floor to the top floor. And when we say that, we really mean it. So that's Epicore.
Your annual Insights User Conference is just around the corner, the Epicore Insights Conference. What are you looking forward to there, and what could we expect to hear about at this conference?
The big thing for me is that we get a lot of what I would call quality time with our customers. And when I say quality time, I mean good old-fashioned, face-to-face, in the same place at the same time, experience with the customers where they tell you what they really think. And in the case of Epicore, we get a lot of great feedback around applications, features, technologies that they love. And in some cases, where we've fallen short. I can tell you that when I think about some of the big projects we've done in the last 7 years that have made the biggest impact on both improving the customer experience, and this would include everything from Prophet 21 and Eclipse, which are distribution products, to Kinetic, which is for manufacturing, to our catalog, which is for automobiles. The feedback that has come directly from our customers at the Insights Conference has had the biggest impact on me. And in many cases, it's resulted in the biggest budgetary decisions I've made to fund projects. So I really appreciate the direct feedback we get. It isn't always fun. It can be a little bumpy, but customers know what they want, and our customers are very deep into their industries. So it's a level of information and intelligence we couldn't get any other way. I always look forward to that. That's the highlight for me.
And I'll do anything you ever dreamed to be complete.
Hello, welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode of 172. My name's Eric Kimberling. I'm here at Darian, and we're chatting. We just chatted with Walker Reynolds, talking about the future of manufacturing technology. What were some of your thoughts and takeaways from that, Darian?
Yeah, I think it was a super interesting conversation. I think he has a lot of good insights. I really liked the point where he said, for every manufacturer, you're going to need a variety of systems. It's not just a one fit all solution type of thing, especially when it comes to different softwares. You need a variety of different softwares or manual processes to complement them and everything like that. So I thought that part of the conversation was really interesting to think about from that perspective, because he made the point that these softwares then aren't talking to each other. So how can you have a variety of systems if they're not talking to each other, but you need a variety of systems in order to work? So I thought that point was really interesting. And then the other point that he made at the end there, that was the 3 points that a company should focus on. And one of them was being the digital strategy. And if you don't have a digital strategy, you need to make sure that your company has one. And my question to that was, so if your company doesn't have a digital strategy, I know he said to go talk to the highest person that you could and ask them what their digital strategy is. And if they don't have one, then you definitely need to implement one. But what does a company do if they don't have a digital strategy? How do they start that implementation of a digital strategy, I guess?
Yeah, well, it's a great question, and I had that same thought too. It's like, all right, it's good to have one, but what if you don't? What do you do? And I think the key is really to look at, just back up and forget about technology for a minute and just try and articulate and clarify what it is we're trying to accomplish as an organization. So what are our long-term strategy, goals, and objectives, and how can we start to translate that long-term strategy, goals, and objectives into a specific strategy of how technology is going to help us get there? I think if you do that, that connecting of the dots is something that a lot of organizations don't do. They sort of set aside strategy and set it over on the side and then say, okay, over here, we've got a digital transformation. We need to replace our old systems, or, vendors cutting us off and isn't going to maintain our current legacy system anymore, so we have to replace it. Or we've outgrown the system, so we have to replace it, so let's go replace it. And that becomes the driving factor, the driving force, rather than, well, what about the strategy we just set aside over here? Maybe that should have something to do with it, and that should be the main driver of what it is you try to accomplish. And so that's where I'd start, is just look at your company, because most companies and most leadership teams do have a clear sense of what they want to accomplish as an organization. It's pretty rare that we come across one that doesn't have that, at least in their heads, of what it is they're trying to accomplish and what their goals are. So just take that stuff that's in the executives and the leadership's heads, you start to translate that into what does that mean for digital transformation for us and digital strategy for us.
Yeah, I get that. That makes sense. One other thing that I think was really interesting that he said was that 9 out of 10 companies weren't properly using or collecting the data that they need in order to scale or do their job the best as possible, I guess. What does it look like? Why is it so many companies that aren't using their data when they all know that they need data to do better? Is there certain things that they need to change in order to then gather that data, or why is that disconnect there, I guess?
Well, I'd say most of it comes down to systems and people. So for a lot of organizations, it's because they have siloed systems, or they've got old systems where the data has just gotten dirty and corrupt over time, and they haven't taken the time to go clean it up and to keep the data clean. That's a concept of data hygiene that we've talked about on this podcast in the past. So that's one piece, is just the systems and the data itself gets dirty, and then there's no focus on cleaning up that data. And then probably the bigger issue that's even more of a root cause and more fundamental is just the people side of it, just making sure that people understand how their jobs affect data and what their responsibilities are as it relates to maintaining data and making sure that the organization has accurate data. And it may not sound sexy or fun or like something that a lot of people want to deal with, but you have to do that. I mean, you have to have the human interaction with data has to be consistent, and it has to make sense, so that you don't end up with dirty data, or you don't end up with a situation where we're unintentionally doing something upstream that's causing inaccurate data downstream, which then creates inaccurate AI hallucinations, which we talked about with Walker as well. So it's a people thing and a behavioral thing just as much as it is a technology thing as well.
Interesting. Yeah, some really interesting topics, different, even getting into the Industry 5.0 and how that's really just all theory right now, as Walker said, and how that's going to develop. So really good, interesting topic today.
Yeah, it was super interesting. Love having him on the show, and he's definitely one of those guests that we could have just kept rolling for another hour or two and not run out of things to talk about. So it flew by. Appreciate having him on. And again, check out stratosphere2024.com to see how that Digital Stratosphere conference is coming together. And Walker is one of the many speakers that will be there, and he's a great speaker, by the way. If you ever get a chance to see him either at our conference at Digital Stratosphere or any industry conference, he's really good to see. He's very engaging, and you definitely not going to experience a dull moment when he's presenting. And he refuses to use PowerPoint too, which is another thing we didn't talk about in the podcast. But when he presents, he refuses. Like he refused. We asked for the PowerPoint slides ahead of time last year for the Digital Stratosphere conference, just so we had it all in one place and we knew everyone was all set. And he said, I don't use PowerPoint, I refuse. And it's like a company policy that they don't use PowerPoint within his companies too. So really interesting guy, which it's actually interesting too, because it forces him to communicate even better because he doesn't have the luxury of having PowerPoint slides. So interesting guy for sure. So we're going to shift gears though and talk about how much ERP software costs. So we're going to roll you a clip right now of a recent video on my YouTube channel where I try to whiteboard and unpack and discuss and analyze how organizations can define realistic implementation budgets for their total cost of ownership for their ERP investments and their enterprise technology investments. So let's go ahead and play you the clip, and then we'll come back and debrief on some of this.
One of the services we provide as part of our planning services for our clients is helping them budget for their ERP implementation. Now, the challenge with ERP implementations is not just that most projects go over budget, but the real root cause is that most projects don't have the right budget to begin with. So while there are cases or situations where an organization just mismanaged the budget or didn't have the right project controls in place, that's a real problem and a real risk. The even bigger problem is that there was never a realistic budget set in the first place. So the question becomes, how do we define a realistic budget? Is the software vendor going to give us a realistic budget? Is our system integrator going to give us a realistic budget? What are all the different components we've got to include? Those are some of the things I want to talk about here in today's video. Before we dive too far into today's content, I want to share a little bit of information about Third Stage Consulting and who we are. Third Stage Consulting Group is an independent technology agnostic provider of consulting services to help clients through their digital transformations. We help with digital strategy and software selection, as well as implementation planning. And during implementation, we provide services related to program management, organizational change, business process improvement, as well as enterprise architecture. These are just some of the services we provide. We have offices in North America as well as Europe and Asia Pacific. So if you'd like to learn more, I encourage you to check out our resource center, which includes a number of resources that will help you through your digital transformation, and you can access that for free using the QR code here or the links below. You can also reach out to me directly if you'd like to discuss your digital transformation and brainstorm ideas on how to improve where you're headed on your journey. Now let's jump back into today's content. Now, the first input we typically start with when defining a budget is the vendor proposals. And I'm going to draw this out, and I'm going to make it green because vendors are trying to make money at this point. So they're trying to sell you, and this is what the vendor proposal is typically used for, is an input into your overall project. So vendor gives you a proposal. They include the amount of money, the amount of time, they include resources, and of course, they include scope. Now, the problem is that most organizations think that this is the real budget. They think that if the proposal says, let's say $10 million, that it's going to be $10 million. And they take that at face value. Now, there's a problem here. The reality is this is not accurate. This proposal was never accurate. A few reasons why. One is flawed assumptions. More often than not, software vendors don't fully understand or have a realistic set of expectations for what your project is going to entail. For example, some of the assumptions that vendors will typically assume is that you're going to take the base vanilla software as is and you're not going to change it. You're not going to customize it. You're not going to do a whole lot of integration, and data migration is going to be easy. They're going to assume you've got your data all cleaned up and all this stuff that is likely not realistic to begin with. And this is a very common phenomena we see in vendor proposals. The other big problem with vendor proposals is that they are incomplete scopes. Not because they intentionally left anything out or because they don't want to sell you more stuff, but because this is just for technology. This is just a technology implementation here that they're proposing. But the reality is we have to add process change, data, change management, training, all kinds of stuff that is generally not included in the proposal, or if it is included in the proposal, it's very light and it's not enough to get you where you need to be. So when you look at these flawed assumptions and the incomplete scope that is provided, it becomes clear that this $10 million can suddenly become something much more. It could end up being 13 or 15 million or whatever the numbers are. I'm not going to get into exact hypothetical scenarios, but generally speaking, these numbers are not nearly enough. Now, another thing that's oftentimes missing is the other costs. So there's typically costs associated with decommissioning legacy systems, backfilling your resources, obviously some of these incomplete scope components that I already talked about. So there's other costs that get added to this $10 million in this example. And so we've got to figure out what are these things that we need to do to change our assumptions, to change the scope, to be more realistic so that we can come up with a number that's more realistic. Now, this may end up being the real number you pay to the vendors, but that doesn't mean that's your total cost of ownership or your total implementation cost. But when you're working with your management team and trying to get approval with your board, you need to know what the total cost of ownership is. They don't necessarily care just what are you paying to your software vendor and your system integrator. They want to know what is the total cost for the project, and that's what we've got to figure out.
We're here playing you a clip of how much ERP software costs and how to define your ERP implementation budget. We've got a lot more to cover in this conversation, but first we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with more Transformation Ground Control.
My name is Eric Kimberling, and I'm the CEO and founder of Third Stage Consulting. Before we dive too far into today's content, I want to invite you to learn a little bit more about Third Stage Consulting, who we are and what we do. We help clients through their entire digital transformation life cycles, beginning with digital strategy, software evaluation and selection, all the way through and including implementation planning, implementation readiness, and the actual implementation itself. We're technology agnostic, so we only represent our clients' best interests. We do not represent software vendors. But having said that, we work very closely with software vendors, all the leading players that you can imagine we've worked with, both in helping clients evaluate and select them, but also in helping clients implement those solutions as well. So we have a very broad, objective, agnostic view of the market that is meant to really represent your interest as you go through your digital transformation. I also encourage you to scan this QR code right here to get access to our resource center. This resource center has a ton of information, a ton of ebooks that are free. You have access to top 10 software rankings, playbooks for how to make your project more successful, guides to change management, YouTube videos, all kinds of stuff that are going to help you through your digital transformation. So I encourage you to scan this QR code to get access to those resources. And please feel free to reach out to me directly to brainstorm ideas about your project. Even if it's just informally, you want to bounce around some ideas and get some informal advice, I'd be happy to spend some time with you. So feel free to reach out to me. I've included my contact information below. You can also find it in the description field of this video as well.
Are you looking for ways to promote your product or service to enterprise technology decision makers and influencers throughout the world, like the ones who listen to this podcast? Major Tom Productions creates media, events, and influencer marketing for B2B technology providers. Our productions are exciting, educational, disruptive, and effective. Most importantly, they create results. Our content is unlike any other in this industry, engaging, influential, and trusted by technology buyers and influencers throughout the world. Each month, our productions reach hundreds of thousands of targeted buyers and decision makers who trust and engage with our honest and tech-agnostic content. With long-tail viral results and engagement with our content, Major Tom Productions provides a way to reach your target market and create awareness, calls to action, and a connection with potential customers. So collaborate with us today. Learn how we can feature your product or service on podcasts such as Transformation Ground Control, Journey to S/4HANA, and Journey to Dynamics 365. We can also feature your brand on our YouTube channel called Digital Transformation with Eric Kimberling, which boasts over 100,000 subscribers and over 2 million video views per year. You can also participate in our in-person events, including our Digital Stratosphere Conference. Contact us today to learn more. We can tailor a marketing campaign that works for you. We look forward to helping more people learn more about and become engaged with your brand.
Hello, welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode 172. My name is Eric Kimberling here with Darian Chwialkowski. We're playing you a YouTube clip from my YouTube channel where I talk about how to define what your ERP software implementation budget is. Let's keep going through the clip now. So we talk about the flawed assumptions. What is it we need to do to adjust our assumptions so they're more realistic? And that's what I want to talk about next. So we need to adjust our assumptions. So the ways we adjust our assumptions is, first of all, we complete the scope. So this is where we look at all the things that need to go into our project that were not included in the project proposal. Things like process improvement, the data cleansing and migration and mapping and just moving the data, testing, all that stuff. That's a big work stream that can cost a lot of money, take a lot of time. But typically, there's a little clause in the vendor proposals that say you're going to do that. Just give us the data, we'll load it for you, but just clean it up. Make sure you've got all the data we need, and then we'll bring it over for you. It's typically not that easy, though. There's a lot of effort that goes into data migration. Same with change management. Software vendors are generally going to say, we will do a real high-level train-the-trainer program, but then you, Mr. or Mrs. Client, is going to take that training, and you're going to go do the training with all of your hundreds or thousands of employees that you have, and there is a cost associated with that. There's a time associated with that, too. So we need to complete the scope in terms of training, in terms of data migration, in terms of just the general change management activities. There's a lot of change management stuff that leads up to training or should lead up to training that needs to happen as well. And I have a whole video and a whole playlist on my YouTube channel. You can find it right here that talks about organizational change management and what it is you need to do to complete your change strategy. Another really important assumption is how fast your organization realistically can change. So I'm going to call this out as a separate line item here. So the pace of change, the pace that your organization can realistic change is really important here because that is an assumption that is often wrong in a vendor proposal. For example,
vendor proposal for $10 million might assume that this is going to take, say, 18 months. They are going to be able to deploy technology to your organization in 18 months. And let's assume that this is realistic. They really could and can and will deploy new technology to your organization in 18 months. The problem is that there's a lot of decisions you need to make and a lot of things you need to do in those 18 months that you may not be able to get done in 18 months. It may not be realistic. There may be big decisions to be made as an organization. There might be major material changes to the scope that are going to push that timeline out. And so we just have to know not just how long it takes for the technical track to complete its work, which let's just say is 18 months, but how fast are we as an organization going to change our people, our processes, and some of the other factors within a digital transformation. And chances are pretty high that the pace of change is going to be slower than what the vendor is proposing, in which case we've got to figure out then, if it's not 18 months, what is it? Is it 24 months? Is it 36 months? Whatever that number is, then we've got to figure out, well, what does that mean to our cost? Does that mean we're going to pay the vendor more because now we've extended the timeline by 50%? Does that mean their cost goes from $10 million to $15 million? Or does it mean that we're still going to spend $10 million, but we're going to spread it out over a longer term? We need to know that up front, because if we assume 18 months and the vendor is running at a rate to accomplish $10 million in 18 months, and then we push it out 50%, the vendor is not going to start charging you for some of that idle time they might have had while you were making decisions. So we've got to have that plan up front that says maybe we don't run at that same rate. Maybe we run at a lower monthly or quarterly rate, a burn rate, to stretch that out over longer time. Whatever the case may be, we need to go through that rationalization process. And again, not just take the vendor proposal at face value. So these are some of the ways we've got to adjust the assumptions to ensure that we have a realistic view of what the overall budget is going to be. So this brings us to the total cost. How do we get to that total cost of ownership? And that's ultimately what we're trying to get at. And this is the operative word, is total cost of ownership. And that's different than vendor proposal cost for technology. This is vendor proposal cost for technology. This is total cost of ownership, two different things. This is one line item within total cost of ownership. So of course your vendor proposal is part of this. And I'm going to clarify though, your vendor proposal is part of it, but it's also the validated proposal. So back to the previous point, if we say that this number is not realistic for whatever reason, maybe it's 12 million or whatever the case may be, not that we want to willingly just offer more money to the vendor, but if our assumptions need to be changed, they may come back with a budget for their services that's higher than what they originally proposed. So regardless of how we get there, we want to make sure that the vendor proposal is validated and has realistic assumptions. We also have to add other line items. So this is where we add some of the additional things that we've talked about so far. So as we complete the incomplete scope and we add process improvement, data migration work streams, change management work streams, integration work streams, even things like user acceptance testing and the overall test cycles, oftentimes you're going to get a bare-boned version of testing with very few iterations, because realistically what the vendor needs to deliver is technology that works, not necessarily technology that works for your business. Again, those are two very different things. You're going to pay a lot less for technology that works. You're going to pay a little bit more for technology that works for your business. And I would argue if you're only going to implement technology that works, that doesn't work for your business, just don't do it at all. It's not worth it. You're not going to get the business value you expect. So let's assume that you want to get technology that works for your business. We've got to make sure that we add these other line items to ensure that we complete the technology picture to include other non-technology components like change management, data migration, process improvement, etc. And then the final thing we need to add here is the cost of risk. And this is a really important one because this gets overlooked so often. And the cost of risk is not necessarily just the risk of what happens here in the implementation, but it's also the cost of what might happen after implementation. So in other words, if we were going to go with a budget that actually is $10 million, but it's a bare-bone version of an implementation, what does that do to our risk profile? And I would argue and submit to you that it's actually going to increase your risk significantly, materially, after go-live, meaning that chances are pretty high the go-live is going to be a disaster because you haven't done all these other things that are non-technological, but they're important to your business. And if you don't do that, what ends up happening is you go live and then suddenly you can't ship product, you can't close the books, you can't run payroll, and that can add up to millions and millions of dollars. In fact, the cost of risk and the cost of operational disruption at the time of go live can cost exponentially more than the implementation itself. So you really have to look at the risk reward of what if we invest a little bit more in the implementation in the name of minimizing risk at the time of go live. And that's the way we have to look at this, is that cost-benefit analysis. So one interesting metric that we found in our research over the years is that 52% of organizations that go live with ERP technology experience some type of operational disruption. And not just any sort of operational disruption. This is a material operational disruption, meaning they can't close the books, can't ship product, can't pay their employees, et cetera. Not talking about just your basic, there are a few hiccups along the way, we were a little less productive than we were before, right at the time of go live. I'm talking about material operational disruptions. And those 52% of organizations that have material operational disruptions typically pay a lot more in the form of risk post-implementation than they pay in the actual implementation itself. So these are all the things we have to do to rationalize the proposal we get from a software vendor. We have to complete it, we have to rationalize it, validate it, complete it, and then we end up with the total cost of ownership. I also have another video on my YouTube channel that might be of interest to you. It's called How to Create a Business Case. In that, I talk in more detail about how to lay out some of your cost line items, some of your business benefits line items, and ultimately help you arrive at an ROI analysis. That might be of interest to you as a follow-up to this video as well.
So that's an overview or a clip from my YouTube video where I talk about how to define an ERP implementation budget. What were some of your thoughts and takeaways from that video, Darian?
Yeah, I think you can learn a lot from it. I think there's a lot of different areas that we could break down throughout the video. I have a few questions from you after I watched the video that I wanted to follow up with you about. The first one being, how can these organizations you're saying that need to set their budget for their transformation, how can they realistically assess their pace of change and incorporate this into the budget planning that they're doing?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, there's a maturity level that you've got to assess, in terms of where you are now and where you're going in the future and how big of a jump that is. And I'd love to say there's a science to it, and I can give you a formula right now that helps you do that. Unfortunately, it's more of a qualitative art where you've got to look at, how one organization compares to others. And so when we go into consult clients, one of the first things we do is we try to understand, how big of a leap is this between where they are today and where they're going? How does that compare to other companies that have been through digital transformations, and where do they fall on that spectrum? So it's not a hard and fast rule, quantifiable rule, but it's one that's based on experience and based on having worked with so many clients that will help modify an implementation plan up or down, and a budget up or down based on those factors.
Super interesting. Another area I wanted to touch on too was talking about the vendor proposals, which you talked about in that video, and how that plays part into your budget. But what additional line items should be considered to calculate the TCO beyond what's typically included in those proposals from vendors?
Yeah, I mean, we just have to recognize that the vendor proposal is sort of one work stream and one major line item in your budget, but it's not the complete budget. So you've got to just make sure you've got some of the other categories covered. Things like data migration and the integration of different systems. We talked about that with Walker earlier. It's pretty rare that you're going to implement one system and that's going to solve all your problems. Chances are really high that you're going to have multiple systems. Even if one core system is doing 80% of your business, you're still going to have to integrate it with other parts of your business. So just understanding that there's integration cost, data cost. Certainly there's change management costs as far as going beyond just the trainer that most software vendors will do. You also need to make sure you're rolling out training to the entire organization and doing the other change and adoption types of stuff. There's also the time to define your business process improvements, the overall program management. Those are some of the cost categories, but then what's even more material, in my opinion, is the time, the impact on time. You look at something like business process management or business process improvement. That's not necessarily a huge line item on a budget, but it does have a big impact on elapsed duration. And the reason that's so important is because if you're running at a certain monthly run rate and you extend the project from, say, 18 months to 24 months, that's going to extend your cost pretty materially versus, if you say going in, it's going to be 24 months instead of 18 because we're going to take time up front to do some of the business process work, then you know that you can sort of scale back that run rate to spread out the project over more time versus the organizations, they get surprised or blindsided. They assume 18 months and then they stretch out to 24 months, but they spend the same amount per month for those extra 6 months. So that's kind of the way you've got to think about it when you're going through that process.
Yeah, that makes sense. So think about more than just the vendor, basically.
Yes,
Just
absolutely.
one.
That's just
one
it's
thing.
one line item on your overall budget and plan.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this video and everything you said is some really great advice or tips, I guess you could say, for any companies that are looking to set their implementation budgets. So there's a lot of great information there.
Yeah. Hopefully it helps, and hopefully it gives you some thoughts on how to come up with a realistic budget and plan. And I think I said at the top of that video, and I'll reiterate it here, is that one of the biggest failure points for digital transformations is having unrealistic expectations. And if you go in with an unrealistic plan and an unrealistic budget, you sort of have set up failure before you've ever started, because now you're boxed into a corner. You're trying to do something that was never realistic, and so your hands are tied. You're trying to implement faster and with less money than it is all realistic. Whereas if you just up front recognize that it's going to cost you more than you think, it's going to take you longer than you think, and here's what it's really going to be, at least then if people push back or you don't like that answer, at least you have time to react to it or do something about it, versus if it just happens to you, then you have no choice. So I think it's really important to go through that process and be somewhat skeptical of proposals you might get from software vendors, because they're usually not going to be realistic about what it's going to take to get the job done right. So great conversation, and hopefully that helps. And I appreciate having you on here today, Darian. Appreciate having Walker on. Appreciate the audience questions. Great comments and questions that we got to here today. So thank you for that. You can find new episodes of this show every Wednesday by going to transformationgroundcontrol.com. Be sure to also check out our sister podcast called Journey to S4HANA.com. That's one that we just launched not too long ago. If you're going through an S4HANA implementation, it's very focused on the world of SAP. You can go to journey2s4hana.com to see or listen to that podcast. So I want to thank you all for being here. Hope you have a great week, and we'll see you next week on Transformation Ground Control. Take care.